Over a 7-month period, I made some small but significant changes to my lifestyle. And over that time, I looked into a number of things that can and do affect how long we're healthy for and how long we live for. It was an 8-episode series, but we thought we'd put it together in one long-form video so that you can enjoy the whole thing as and when you wish. I hope you do enjoy it, and if you'd like to share it with anyone, that would be massively appreciated. I have a new goal, and it's one that I would like you all to join in with, if you're up for it. It's not to see how fit I can get in the space of 10 weeks. It's not to run a fast half marathon, nor to do my best at a Gran Fondo or Sportive. There is no fixed date for this goal. In fact, the end goal is the end of life, and pushing that as far into the distance as I possibly can. How? By learning about the changes we can all make to push our end of lives further into the distance, be that exercise or food or sleep or just general lifestyle changes that should make a difference and allow us to live the longest, healthiest lives we can. How much difference can these things make? Well, over the course of this series, for the next 6 months or so, my aim is to find out what difference they can make. There are a number of key markers that doctors and physiologists can look at with which they can make a pretty accurate estimate of how long you're going to live. So in no particular order, they are VO2 max, i.e. maximum amount of oxygen your body can use during high intensity exercise, muscle mass, so the total weight of muscle on your body, leg strength, which will enable mobility in old age and prevent unnecessary falls, balance, which relates in many ways to general strength, and finally, grip strength. Bit of a weird one that, but lots of studies have shown a strong correlation between grip strength and mortality. And some doctors even say it's a better indication of life expectancy than blood pressure. Anyway, it's time for me to find out through a series of tests where I lie in all of these key markers. Before I get on to those tests though, I'm going to give you a very brief snapshot of where I'm at now and how I got here. So I was an active child participating in a multitude of sports, but I ended up focusing on cycling, where I was fortunate enough to have a professional career. That career ended when I was 32, and since then, my relationship with exercise has been sporadic, I would say, if I'm being generous. So I've dabbled with some running, a bit of cycling, and the very occasional strength session, but there have been very long periods where I've done little to no exercise at all. I just had no goals to aim for, basically. However, what I have been very consistent at doing, without any goal or purpose, is drinking quite heavily and burning the candle at both ends. And being completely honest with you all, and I've never actually mentioned this in public before, I also smoked quite heavily between 2012 and 2020. Now, I did eventually manage to quit, thankfully, but since then I've been on nicotine replacements, which I'd also like to quit in the very near future. Now, the point of giving you this background is really just to show that I have my own vices, despite my early years spent as a clean living full-time athlete. Now, some of you watching this will never have smoked in your life or never drunk alcohol in your lives, but maybe you struggle with getting things right with food or sleep or motivation or anything in between. The point is that most of us have something that we would genuinely like to change for the better. Don't get me wrong, I don't think I'm in a really bad place, not at all. I've just arrived at a time in my own personal life where I would like to do better. I assure you though that this series is not going to be about living like a monk or becoming perfect. It's about making a number of fairly small and simple changes in lifestyle that should add up and I guess compound over the coming years and decades hopefully to make a really big difference. So wherever you're at in life, I would absolutely love it if you came on this journey with me. And if you know anyone that's looking to make some changes in their own life right now, why not share this video with them? Sometimes you just need a really small nudge, a small bit of encouragement to set you along the right path and along your way. Oh, just one last thing, I'm 43. Now, to some of you watching this, that is going to sound very old. To others, it's going to sound very young. Either way, I'm not as fit as I used to be, and I feel the need to do something about it. Right, time now to find out where I'm personally at physiologically. I've arrived at the Manchester Institute of Health and Performance, which is operated by Nuffield Health, who are the UK's largest healthcare charity. They're non-profit and their aim
is to build a healthier nation, which seems perfect for this series of videos. I'm going to meet a guy called Connor, who will be putting me through my paces. A few tests to find out where I'm at, what I most need to improve, and we'll have those baseline figures then, so I can see how much I do improve over the next 6 months or so. It's going to be painful but interesting. So first things first, a blood test and a urine test, the results of which I will get at a later date. Both there just to find out if there's any major problems that I need to address. I'd now like to introduce you to Connor, who's going to be conducting a lot of the rest of the tests for the rest of today. The first of which is?
A DEXA scan. Yeah, so a DEXA scan is kind of the gold standard measurement for body composition. So we get a really good measurement of your body fat, visceral fat. We can even do things like your bone density and things like that too.
Does it measure overall muscle mass?
Yep. Yeah, it does the works. You're not going to get a much more gold standard test than this for body comp. So it's a really simple test. You just basically take your clothes off, lie down on the bed for 5 minutes, and we let a small amount of x-rays just scan your whole body.
Easiest part of the day then, by the sounds of it.
5 minutes, relax.
The difference between visceral fat and body fat is?
They're used for slightly different things. So your body fat can be used as like an overall like measurement of your health, whereas we know your visceral fat tends to have a slightly higher risk with most diseases. So you can use that in combination with like other body composition measurements, like your BMI, like your waist size, to give you kind of more overall structure of your health and general disease risk.
Brief interlude. Time to introduce a sponsor of this series. Before I do that though, I just want to say how important our partners are to us in what we do here at GCN. Without them, there is simply no way that we can make all the free-to-view content that we do. But I really want to emphasize to all of you, we only ever work with great companies who make products that we really want to use. So on that note, this series is sponsored by Whoop, who make this fitness tracking and fitness coaching wearable device. I have personally used mine non-stop for over 2 years now, and it really has been quite enlightening in a number of ways. Particularly, I will say, in highlighting to me how much alcohol affects my sleep and pretty much every other parameter of recovery. Like many people, I feel like the lights literally and metaphorically go out when I go to bed after an evening of drinking. But the reality is that my heart rate at rest is about 10 beats per minute higher than it normally would be. My breathing rate is significantly higher, and the quality of my sleep is significantly lower. Heart rate variability also plummets. That hasn't stopped me drinking completely. I still love going out with mates, but it certainly made me cut down a bit and much more aware of what it's doing to me. So I'm going to be using my Whoop to track everything that I'm doing over the next few months and indeed monitor any positive changes that occur. I will also be speaking to an expert from Whoop in one of the next episodes to see what they make of my data from the last couple of years where I've been wearing it. But in the meantime, back to the tests.
Yeah, so your body fat percentage total sits at 19.1%.
Is it really? Christ.
It will, like, the reference ranges for how healthy that is depends on your age, but we'd expect for most people, especially like the younger people, for their body fat to be below 22%.
Yeah.
So yours is, definitely within the healthy range for someone of your age and gender, which is great. So we're just going to do your waist size next, which is a really, really simple measure, but actually really important for your health.
I'm the sort of not liking the sound of this because whilst I haven't put much weight on over the last 12 years, where I have put it on is just around there.
Yeah, so I think it's a blessing and a curse. Like you say, some people find it scary because, okay, well, if my waist size is elevated, then all these other things are also going to increase. But you can apply the reverse logic as well. So by making a few very, very, very small changes to things like your waist size or your blood sugars or your blood pressure, then all of a sudden you can reduce your risk of quite a lot of diseases quite quickly too.
Okay, fair enough.
We can have a look now at like your force plate data. We're going to do an IKD as well.
It's quite a mental build-up, isn't it?
Yeah.
doing a few minutes warm up on the bike and on a couple of the machines here, because the next test I'm going to do, a kind of maximal force test or maximum strength test. There's a real risk I might pull something, even with a warm up, but hopefully less likely.
All right, Dan, so what we're gonna do here is an isometric mid-thigh pull. Your task is to basically drive through the floor with as much force as possible, and allows us to have a look at your lower limb force production capabilities. So when I say 3, 2, 1, go, you're gonna rip the bar up, drive down through the floor, and you're gonna have the maximal force production for about 5 seconds. Okay?
I'm already nervous.
Nice, pull, drive, up, and relax. Yes, much better. So next down, we're going to be doing an isokinetic dynamometer. It allows us to look at your maximal force production in your quads and your hamstrings in both the right and the left leg. So you're going to be kicking and pulling as hard as you possibly can, but now you're nice and secure in this chair, and we're going to measure your force production when you're doing the flexion and extension.
Yep.
We can have a look at the data and see how the limbs differ in both the quads and the hamstrings, and then we can have a look at your total force production relative to your body weight as well, which is a really, really useful measure as to how well you can produce force, essentially.
Okay. And how many reps?
So you're going to be doing a warm-up set of 5 reps, where you're going to start off at 50% and then just work slowly up to 100. And then when we do the working set, 5 reps, all out, push, pull as hard as you possibly can.
Okay.
All right.
Happy?
I think so, yeah.
So if you just extend up as far as is comfortable for you. That's it. And then if you pull your heel all the way back to the chair. Yeah. 2, 1.
Go on, Dan, let's go. Kick. Yes, pull. Nice, good start. Push, Dan. Go on, all the way, pull. Go on, max effort here, Dan. Come on, kick.
Come on, 2 more.
Good effort, come on. Go on, Dan, keep it up. Push. Come on, Dan, last one. Pull. Yes, good effort. We'd expect people's deficits to be within like 10%. On your quads, your deficit is 5%.
Okay.
And your flexion is 4%.
Okay,
so, yeah, your hams and quads are very, very symmetrical. But if anything, the overall production could be improved a little bit, but they're still really good values.
Okay. Well, hopefully they'll improve over the next 6 months.
Fingers
That's
crossed.
the aim.
We want you to start at a cadence around 85 to 90. You might find yours a little bit higher than that. That's absolutely fine. We'll figure out what's kind of comfortable for you in the first couple of minutes. Once we found that cadence, just hold it. Hold it. Every 15 seconds, the wattage is going to go up by 5 watts.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, that is right, the right way around. And then so it's basically 20 watts every minute, and we just keep going until you can't go anymore, or until we see that the cadence drop by 10.
I think it will probably be around 80.
Absolutely fine. Whatever's comfortable for you, and then once we found that in the first couple of minutes, we just ask you to hold it.
Okay.
All right. We'll start the test now. That's you cycling 75 watts for a minute. Yeah, that cadence seems to be sitting around 80, so that's absolutely fine. Okay, so just 15 seconds left of the warm-up. So you're cycling at 80 watts now. You're going to feel a slight bit more resistance come through the pedals in 3, 2, 1. So that's increased by another 5. That's 95. That's 100. So that's 20 watts in 1 minute, okay? Cadence is sitting really nice there, around 82, 83. Really nice, Dan. That's 9 minutes. Really good stuff. Really good, Dan. I can see it's getting tough, but that cadence is still holding, so let's just keep pushing through. Really nice. And Dan, up. Come on, let's get that cadence up. Up. Come on, Dan. Come on, Dan. Drive. Come on. As much as you can push now. Push. Go on, Dan. Last little bit. Come on. Go on, Dan. Drive. Come on, push. Come on, Dan, last little bit. Come on, keep working. Come on, Dan, up. And stop there. Really good stuff, mate. Well done. Really good work, mate. Well done.
Thank you. God, it just bites so quickly at the end, you forget.
Yeah, it's the nature
Like,
of a max
this
test,
is
isn't
good,
it?
this
You're
is
fine
good, this is
until
good,
you're not. Yeah. To be honest, you actually hit your max a long time ago. Like your aerobic capacity, at that end point there, you were working anaerobically, which is fine. It's why you can carry on. But on the bike, we just let you go until you can't go anymore because it's good for you to give it a go.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can see like we're looking for this crossover, and we want this like VO2 here to plateau out. And you can see it did quite a while ago, and even your RER value. So we normally say you've reached max when you're at an RER over 1.15, and you did that in minute 9.
What's RER, sorry?
So the RER is your respiratory exchange ratio. It's basically the contribution of like fats versus carbohydrates you're using. So an RER value over of 1.15 implies that you're using purely carbohydrates and no fats. So we have some termination criteria for like saying you've hit VO2 max.
Yeah.
We want this VO2 to plateau. We want a RER value over 1.15, and we want like your blood lactate and your heart rate to be near max as well. So without me even going into the data, I can probably say quite confidently here we have hit your VO2 max. We'll need to actually just dive into the numbers in the Excel spreadsheets, figure out what that is, but we'll get that into the report for you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Colin, I think.
No problem at all. Yeah, good
Thanks,
job.
Fran.
Really good job.
So I haven't done one for 13 years. Now I'll be doing 2 in the space of 6 or 7 months. Lovely. So final one. I've showered, I've sort of recovered. VO2 max results.
Yeah, looking very good. So your VO2 max value for a male of your age comes in at 52.2 millilitres per kilogram per minute, which puts you in the excellent category, which is the highest there is. So given the sort of relationship between like fitness and disease, and along with all the other metrics we saw today, it puts you in like a really, really good place.
And what sort of room for improvement is there? I think my last VO2 max test obviously was during my time as a full-time athlete, and it was low 70 somewhere, so obviously it's going to have fallen from there. Given that I haven't done huge amounts of exercise for the last few years, what would you imagine there is in terms of buffering room at the top end there?
Yeah, your VO2 max, the absolute value, will unfortunately reduce with your age, but in relative terms, you still are able to improve that, I would say. Your result comes in at 52.2. The excellent range starts at 51, so at the lower range of that. So although it still is in the excellent range, if you wanted to improve it further by just doing some more general exercise, then I'm sure you'll be able to increase that a little bit more.
Okay, good to know. Well, I'll be trying to do that for the next 6 months.
And breathe. Now, I'm not going to go through the results of those tests in great detail right now. I'll save that for episode 2. But as a brief summary, I'm not in a bad place. And I think much of that is probably due to the foundations that I had from being a full-time athlete through to my early 30s. However, in the 12 years since then, well, I've now got 4 times as much body fat as I had when I retired, and my VO2 max has gone down by 20 points. So there are already things that I want to improve on, things that I want to slow down in terms of my aging, maybe even stop, maybe even reverse. You never know. Now, if you're watching this video on a cycling channel, the likelihood is you're already exercising more than the average person in the population. But maybe you're not working enough on your overall strength or your muscle mass or your sleep's not very good. Whatever it might be, there are always things that we can work on to give ourselves a better chance at living longer. And more importantly than that, at living a really happy life. I'll finish episode 1 by answering a question that I think a few of you might be asking, which is, why now? Why not 5 years ago or even as soon as I stopped my cycling career? It's a good question. I think that I quite enjoyed rebelling against the life that I used to live. It was nice not to have to think about performance 24/7 or everything that I was putting into my body every day. I had no fitness goals, I had no reason to think about fitness. I ticked that part of my life off. And B, I've come to a realization. The average male life expectancy here in the UK is 82. If I die then, it means I've already lived over half my life.
I think I'd quite like to do everything I can to ensure I still have more than half of my life to come. The other thing is, I've been reading and listening to so much about what we can all do from a mental and physical standpoint to ensure that we do set ourselves up for later in life. And it's those sorts of things I'll be going through in future episodes. At the end of the day though, it doesn't matter when you start. It's never too late, it's also never too early. The important thing is just starting. So here I am, starting. And I really hope as many of you as possible will join in with me. I'll see you all in episode 2.
This is a video about VO2 max, but do not turn it off. VO2 max is relevant and incredibly important to everybody around me here and to every single one of you. Coming up, I'm going to be explaining why it's so important and giving you an update on my own journey back to health and fitness.
I don't know about you, but when I hear the term VO2 max, I think about elite competitive performance. I think about an excruciating test that spits out a number that's only really relevant to professional or top-level endurance athletes.
Why would the rest of us need to care what our VO2 max is? Well, for the past 12 years, my answer to that question would have been, we don't. When my racing career finished, I never wanted to do a VO2 max test ever again, and I didn't give a flying flip what mine was. I've since learned though that VO2 max is something we should be all interested in. We should be interested in finding out what ours currently is, and we should be determined to increase it or maintain it or to slow its inevitable decline as much as we possibly can.
Why? Because it is the greatest predictor of lifespan, more strongly associated with reduced mortality risk than any other metric we know of.
Not my words, but the words of Peter Attia, one of the most respected longevity experts in the world.
Now, before I explain why Dr. Attia, amongst many others, is so adamant that we should all care about VO2 max, I should explain exactly what it is. It's actually quite simple. The V part stands for volume, the O2 part is oxygen, and max is the maximum you can do. So VO2 max is the maximum rate at which someone can utilize oxygen. The more oxygen your body can consume or use during very high intensity exercise, the higher your VO2 max. Now, I emphasize the word use for good reason. You might have a huge lung capacity, but if your body is not efficient at using the oxygen that you're breathing into your lungs, your VO2 max is not going to be that high. This is why VO2 max testing has often been used to identify talent in cycling and many other endurance sports. If you have a natural ability to transport huge amounts of oxygen around your body and into your muscles, you're at an immediate advantage over those that don't.
One thing that I haven't mentioned just yet is that your weight will affect your VO2 max score. So if you get a VO2 max test, the result will be given to you as a number which is millilitres of oxygen that you've used per kilogram of body weight per minute. So if you want to raise your VO2 max test result, you'll need to either A, increase your usage of oxygen efficiency through training, or B, reduce your weight. And that's something you need to be really careful about, particularly as you get older, because the last thing that you want to do is lose any muscle mass. I'll be explaining why in a later episode. Just before I move on, if you enjoy content like this, we'd be really grateful if you could give this video a like and subscribe to our channel. It really does make a big difference to us. Now, even after explaining what VO2 max is, you might still be wondering why it isn't just elite sports people who should care about it. Well, our bodies need oxygen for everything we do. If our blood stopped transporting oxygen around our bodies, we wouldn't be able to do anything. We wouldn't even be able to use our brains to think, let alone use our bodies to move. A good everyday example of this is climbing up a flight of stairs. That typically has a VO2 cost, or volume of oxygen cost, of 60 millilitres per kilogram per minute. For most of you watching this, that's not much at all. Walking up a flight of stairs is not something you even need to really think about. But if you're in your 70s or older and of average VO2 max for your age and your gender, walking up a flight of stairs is going to put you at between 60 and 80% of your aerobic capacity. As you continue to age and your VO2 max continues to decline, walking up a flight of stairs can eventually seem impossible.
If your VO2 max puts you in the elite category in your 70s and beyond, on the other hand, Walking upstairs will use less than 45% of your aerobic capacity. That is a hell of a difference. It means that walking upstairs still feels comfortable. By the way, if you're in that elite category in your 70s, it means you have the same VO2 max as an above average 30-year-old. That sounds almost implausible, but I'm here to tell you that almost every single one of you watching this can achieve that with the right training.
And wouldn't that be great? Not just to be able to continue to walk upstairs unaided, but to be able to pick your grandkids up later in life, to play with them, to even ride a bike with them, and just to be able to do some general daily activities without them feeling too strenuous. In order to achieve that later on in life, you need to ensure that your VO2 max does not decline too much.
If that has piqued your interest, you'll want to know how you go about testing your VO2 max. With the most accurate results, you want to be in a laboratory setting with professional equipment and a coach who knows what they're doing. A quick Google for places here in the UK shows that you can get one done for around £60 to £100 in a lot of places around the country, and I would imagine that costs in other countries around the world will be somewhere in that ballpark. It is quite a lot of money, but this is a test that you don't really need to do too often. I'm doing my second one at the end of this 6-month series, but once a year is enough to know whether you're going in the right direction or not. You might even be able to get it for free if you can get your name down to be part of a study. Anyway, it's effectively a ramp test. You start out at a very easy intensity, generally on a bike, but it can be running if you prefer. Then the power or speed ramps up every 15 seconds or so until you reach complete exhaustion. Somewhere towards the end of that test, you are going to reach your VO2 max, which will be given to you as a number.
I know what your next question is going to be. What does my VO2 max test result mean? How do I compare to others of the same gender and around the same age? Well, we'll put up a table on screen right now so that you can compare to others. You can pause it if you need to. However, if your aim in life is to live the longest, healthiest life possible, the only competition you've got is yourself. There's no point in comparing to others. So if you go out and get a VO2 max test, that result is your own benchmark. Whether you then decide that you want to increase your VO2 max or maintain it or slow its rate of decline is dependent on your training background. So for me personally, well, I've let my foot off the gas for the last decade or so my initial aim will be to increase my VO2 max. When I can no longer do that, it will be to maintain it. When I can no longer do that, it will be to slow its rate of decline. And it will decline. If you maintain your current exercise levels, be that a hell of a lot, nothing at all, or anything in between, your VO2 max is going to go down by 8 to 10% per decade. That's about 1% per year. But the higher it is now, the higher it will be when you get to old age.
I've got some very good news for you though. Whilst ideally you want to have a high VO2 max from a young age, it is possible to increase your VO2 max even in older age. So if you're watching this and you have relatives or friends in their 60s or older, you might want to share this video or this part of the video with them. To do that, right-click on it whilst watching on desktop and click on copy video URL at current time, then paste it into a message or email. So I'm going to give you 3 examples. Firstly, a study conducted by Warren et al. Around 20 years ago, which looked at a group of women with a mean age of 74 and their response to just 12 weeks of training. They reported an increase in VO2 max of 12.6% in just 12 weeks. Secondly, another study by Kress et al. Reported an increase in 16% in women of mean age 72 years in response to 50 weeks of training. Thirdly, and this is probably the one that will resonate most with you since we're a cycling channel, the example of Robert Marchand. Now, for those who've never heard of him, Robert was a Frenchman who rode himself into the Guinness Book of World Records in 2012. He rode 24.25 kilometers in an hour at the age of 101. For the 2 years following that, he was monitored by the University of Évry-Val d'Essonne in France as he followed a bespoke structured training program. Then in 2014, he broke his own record, riding 26.92 kilometers or 16.7 miles in 1 hour.
In those 2 years, he increased his VO2 max from 31 to 35. That is a 13% increase for somebody in their hundreds. Robert sadly passed away a few years ago now at the age of 109, but he was still riding his bike outside when he was 108. And even then, that was only because of hearing loss. His quality of life was exceptional right up until he passed away. And that's what this series is about. It's not just about a long life, it's about living a long, healthy, and very active life. I shall end this part of the video with another quote from Peter Attia talking about VO2 max. There is nobody who can't get themselves into the top 25% of their age and gender category with the right amount of training. So whoever you are, wherever you're at in life, if you can train, you can get yourself into that top quarter. I can hear your next question. How? What can I do to increase my VO2 max? Well, just before I give an example, I need to emphasize that I'm not a doctor nor a health practitioner, so it's really important that you should get your heart health checked by a professional before you jump into high intensity VO2 max exercises.
So here is a potent VO2 max training session. Warm up gradually for around 15 to 30 minutes and then complete a set of 4-minute intervals with 4 minutes recovery between each. Each of those intervals should be performed such that you're only just able to get to the end of them with a rate of perceived exertion that gradually nears 10 out of 10 as the interval progresses. Essentially, you're trying to sustain a pace or power that is close to the maximum you can do for 4 minutes, taking it easy for another 4 and then repeating. Now, I would suggest starting out with 3 intervals in a single session and trying to increase that to 6 over time. The whole session should take an hour or less, and you'll need to do it once a week or even once a fortnight, built into a balanced training program. On top of that, you can find a number of sessions here on GCN that will help you train your VO2 max. We'll put a link to them in the description just down below.
Full disclosure here, the last time that I did a training session aimed specifically at VO2 max was years ago. I will start doing them again, but for the time being, my focus is simply on getting my body moving again. Which brings me nicely on to an update on what exactly I've been doing since episode 1. Well, in the 3 weeks since, I've made some significant positive changes to my lifestyle. Firstly, and what I'm most proud about, I've managed to stop nicotine replacement. I went cold turkey 2.5 weeks ago, and so far, so good. Secondly, I have reduced my alcohol consumption. So I used to drink around 4 to 5 nights per week. I'm now only drinking on Friday and Saturday evenings. So that's probably a reduction for me of around 30 units of alcohol per week. Then in terms of exercise, well, I've just been very consistent with not sitting on my ass all day, every day. In fact, I've been moving quite a lot. I've completed some sort of exercise every single day since episode 1 was released. If you'd like to follow me on Strava, I'm logging all of my activities over there, so just click on the link that we'll put in the description below this video. So, I have been doing some rucking, which is basically walking or hiking off-road with a heavy backpack on, plus
I'm getting back into cycling. Gravel riding mainly, because I'm right on the doorstep of the New Forest National Park, where there's an abundance of fantastic gravel roads. And this morning at 6:15 a.m, an abundance of blue sky and sun. Don't know if you can quite see that, but I promise you it's sunny. And I'm actually enjoying it. I've also been doing some running at work. So my normal Monday, for example, consists of a drive where I'm obviously sat down, sitting at my desk all morning, sitting at my desk having lunch, sitting at my desk or in the studio in the afternoon, sitting in my car going home, sitting on a sofa, and then lying in a bed at night. So I've been trying to get out at lunchtime. The last 3 or 4 Mondays I've done 5 to 6 Ks at a lunchtime on a Monday, just to do something. I'm moving.
on top of all of that, I've also joined a gym. I've even persuaded my wife Lorraine to do so too. For me personally, this is the biggest thing. I need to build strength and muscle ready for later life because I haven't got a huge amount of either going on at the moment. I'll be giving you the science behind why it's so important in a future episode within this series. But just as a summary, for these last 3 weeks, I've done roughly 2 hours per week of strength training, 3 hours a week of riding, and about an hour and a half of running. With the rucking on top of that, that's around 7 hours a week of exercise. Not a huge amount, but certainly a lot more than I had been doing before. There's no written plan, there's nothing specific right now. I'm just trying to move and to do it in a way that I think is sustainable for the long term, rather than diving into a regime that I'm going to want to give up at the end of this 6 months. Anyway, in the space of only 3 weeks, those few small changes have already had a significant impact on my sleep, my resting heart rate and HRV. For example, last Tuesday, my resting heart rate was the lowest I've seen it in the 2.5 years that I've been using my Whoop, who are sponsoring this series. It measured 44 beats per minute, which is about what it was when I was a full-time athlete. I've also had my highest ever heart rate variability since I started recording it at 53. Not particularly high by some people's standards, but a big step in the right direction for me personally.
So, I have now done what I promised in episode 1. I've officially started, and I hope that many of you have too. I was honestly blown away to read the comments underneath that first video and see how many of you it resonated with. If you ever want any encouragement, my DMs on social media are open, and I do my best to reply to as many people as I possibly can.
Right, let me know in the comments section below how you've been getting on if you started this journey with me, and indeed if you go out there and get a VO2 max test done. I'm genuinely interested to know. I'll be back again in a few weeks' time to explain to you why my biggest aim through this journey is to put on some muscle mass, and why I think cyclists in particular need to pay more attention to that. I'll see you then. Power, strength, and muscle.
My number one aim over the next few years is to gain functional power, strength, and muscle. Why? To give myself the best chance of living a long, healthy, and mobile life. Coming up, I'll be letting you know why those 3 things have such strong links to longevity, and give an update on how I've been getting on with my own changes in lifestyle.
As an endurance cyclist by trade, I was never particularly concerned with putting on muscle. In fact, I was more concerned with not putting on muscle, especially on my upper body. Muscle weighs a lot, and that's all weight that as a cyclist, you have to take uphill with you. Basically, if you don't need it, you don't want it. Simple as that.
And you don't have to look too hard at professional endurance cyclists to realise that a near skeletal upper body is pretty much a requirement of being a great climber. Even sprinters and classics riders who look muscular compared to their climbing peers are actually tiny when you see them in real life.
And that works for them. But this series is not about becoming the best bike riders we can. It's about doing what we can to set ourselves up for later life, and that means not having a skeletal body.
Before I explain why power, strength, and muscle can help you live a longer, better life, I think it's important to define strength and power and highlight the difference between those two. So strength is the ability of a neuromuscular system to maintain or overcome external resistance by exerting force. More simply, strength is how much force your muscles can produce. Power is different. So power is about the speed with which we produce that force, and I think we confuse that in cycling circles. We often talk about strong riders, referring to somebody who can ride all day on the front at high speed. In reality, they are powerful. Power equals force times velocity, so the strength you have and how quickly you can exert it. To use cycling as an example, if you exert a certain force through your pedal stroke at 50 revs per minute, you're going to be producing half the amount of power as if you exert that exact same force at 100 revs per minute.
Back to the main topic then. Why do we need to build power, strength, and muscle now? Because we will steadily lose all 3 as we get older. Just like VO2 max, our power, muscle mass, and strength will decline with age so long as we continue to live the same lifestyle. Time for some stats. So, for most healthy people, muscle mass and strength peaks when they're around 30 to 35 years old and decreases slowly after that. Initially, that decline is at a rate of around 3 to 8% per decade, but from the age of 65 in women, 70 in men, roughly, that rate of decline increases dramatically.
Those findings have come from NIA's Baltimore Longitudinal Study of Aging, which is the longest running study of its kind, but plenty of other studies have had similar findings. It's a similar story with bone mass, which declines by around 1% per year from the age of 40. The name for age-related loss of muscle mass and function is sarcopenia. The good news is that although you can't completely stop the decline, you can significantly slow it down. Why would you want to slow it down? Well, it might seem obvious, but slowing it down is going to allow you to continue carrying out everyday tasks such as climbing upstairs, opening a jar, lifting yourself out of a chair, or even just walking well into your old age. It will also help prevent falls, and this is a really big one. So if you're over 65 and you break your hip or your femur through a fall, you've got a 15 to 30% chance of dying within 12 months. That's a staggering statistic, isn't it? I should point out that I'm really not wanting to use this data as any kind of scaremongering. I simply want to highlight some of the scientific data so you all have the knowledge of what will happen to your body over time. That way, you can make your own lifestyle decision based on that. Back to falls though. It's not necessarily the complications of the broken bone itself that leads to the patient losing their life. It's the other consequences. It's the loss of physical function from breaking your hip, for example, which leads to a loss of independence. That in turn leads to lessening social interaction. All of these things can mean the start of the end.
Now, in order to prevent a hip or a leg fracture, you want to reduce your chances of falling and also reduce your chances of breaking your bone if you do fall. Resistance and weight training is going to help with both. Increasing your strength will mean that if you do happen to get off balance, you're far more likely to be able to counterbalance and prevent a fall. However, if you do fall, regular weight training will have built up your bone density, making it slightly less likely you'll break a bone on impact.
As cyclists, this is where we really need to be attentive. So people who only do non-weight-bearing exercise, such as cycling, are more likely to develop osteopenia or osteoporosis. I mean, don't get me wrong on this one, because cycling really is good for you, but it should be supplemented with weight-bearing exercises, such as resistance training or jogging. And I've been trying to do both for the last few months.
Another benefit to strength and resistance training is that it will help you to avoid injury in general. The more you can avoid injury and illness, especially in your older years, the less deterioration there's going to be through periods of inactivity. Now, I'm going to try and predict a few questions you might want to ask, but just before I answer them, a quick request. If you enjoy content like this, we would be really grateful if you could subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, and share it with anyone you think could benefit. That really goes a long, long way to helping us continue making free-to-view content. Okay, question number one, when should I start? Well, just like with VO2 max and everything else I've talked about in this series, the best time to start strength and resistance training is now, but it's also never too late to start. All that matters is starting and then being consistent, making it a habit.
How much should we be doing? Well, that's an it depends sort of question. If strength training is an addition to a few hours of cardio work each week, then 2 to 3 sessions of 45 minutes or so is enough to reap the benefits. It doesn't have to be at a gym. You can do things from home with your own body weight or resistance bands, but I've personally found it easier to go to a gym and have no distraction from what I want to achieve there.
Either way, we should think of all of our training like we would think about saving money. Consistency over time is the key. Put away some money every month, and a few years down the line, with compounding interest, you're going to start noticing your savings boom. The more you have saved for your older years, the more comfortable your later life will be financially. Your fitness and your health is exactly the same as your finances. Consistency over time will pay huge dividends down the line and allow you to live a physically more comfortable later life.
Personally, I'm not expecting to look or feel hugely different after 6 months of documenting this process, but I am expecting to feel a lot of benefits in 5 to 10 years' time, and decades beyond that if I stay consistent in what I'm doing. What resistance training should we be doing? Well, I'm not a qualified personal trainer,
nor do I know the individual needs and muscle imbalances of everybody watching this. So I would recommend finding a good personal trainer to get you started, or looking at some of the many helpful videos here on YouTube. It's really important that you do resistance training in the right way, as there is a risk of injury, the very thing it helps to prevent if you do it properly. There is another thing that I would recommend you consider though. The size of type 2 muscle fibers decline at an even quicker rate than overall strength and muscle mass, and at a much greater rate than type 1 fibers. So type 2 fibers are often referred to as fast twitch. They're what you use for explosive efforts like sprinting or jumping, whilst type 1 fibers, they're slow twitch, the ones we'd use for endurance exercises because they fatigue much slower. Because of the greater decline in fast twitch fibers, it's a really good idea to include some dynamic, explosive training in your weekly schedule. So this could be box jumps or medicine ball throws, anything that requires that really explosive movement, and that will help preserve those fast twitch fibers. You may also want to know how to test your muscle mass and strength so you can see if you're improving or at least slowing your rate of decline.
Well, you may remember in episode 1 that I did a series of tests, one of which was a DEXA scan, which analyses your body composition, how much is fat, how much is muscle, etc. And also a knee extension test to check leg strength. Both of those are relatively expensive to do. However, I also talked about the correlation between grip strength and mortality, and that some doctors believe it's a better indicator of life expectancy than blood pressure.
Before you spend your days trying to improve your hand strength, I should point out why many studies use that metric. It's because it's easy. So a measurement of hand strength is cheap and easily available. You could use a monitor like I did in episode 1, or you can just time how long you can hang off a bar.
Hand strength is seen by many as an easy way of giving an indication of someone's overall strength, and that's because very few people have spent any portion of their life focusing on improving grip strength alone. So, good grip strength very likely means that that person has generally looked after themselves. The final question that many of you will have is, do I need to change my diet with resistance training? Well, diet and nutrition is something I will attempt to cover in a future episode, but what I will say is that another thing that gets less efficient as we get older is protein synthesis. So if you want to gain strength and muscle mass as an older athlete, we want to be at the upper end of recommended protein intake guidelines. Here in the UK, the reference nutrient intake recommends 55 grams per day for men, 45 for women. However, some recent research suggests that older adults should be eating much more than that, around 1.6 to 2.4 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day to support muscle growth. For me, at 75 kilograms, that's 120 to 180 grams of protein per day, a long way above the standard guidelines. If you are getting that amount of protein, then timing of ingestion doesn't really matter, so long as it's spread throughout the day.
Before I move on to my own progress, I wanted to briefly mention a study that was done many years ago and published in the Journal of American Medical Association. So it took a group of 9 people in their 90s and put them through 8 weeks of what was for them high-intensity strength training. In just 8 weeks, their strength gains averaged 174%, their mid-thigh muscle area increased by 9%, and their walking speed improved by 48%. That's in 8 weeks for people in their 90s. That is how powerful resistance training can be, if you'll pardon the pun. Right, for those of you that are interested, I'm going to give an update on how I've been getting on now. Firstly, the negative part. I have lapsed with nicotine. So a friend of mine uses the same nicotine pouches as me, and I made the mistake of having a couple when I was with him in May. Unfortunately, I then went out and bought another box the next day, and I've been unsuccessful in quitting since. I am disappointed with myself, but at the same time, try not to beat myself up over it. I will quit again soon, at least that's what I'm trying to tell myself. By the way, if anyone you know ever thinks of starting these, tell them not to unless it's to help them quit smoking. They are unbelievably addictive and their prevalence is increasing. So a recent survey commissioned by the Professional Footballers Association here in the UK showed that 1 in 5 professional players is using something like that. In much better news though, I have managed to keep to 2 days a week of alcohol, which has been my goal, and my exercise and sleep has been better than I'd hoped for. So in April, I logged 49 activities on Strava and on my Whoop, totaling 30 hours and 336 kilometres. In May, a month I normally struggle with because of covering the Giro d'Italia, I did 53 activities, 37 hours and 453 kilometres. That's the most I've done in many, many years. Those activities are a mixture of running, cycling, strength training and walking. And yes, I do upload my walks to Strava, much to some people's disgust. And if you'd like to see what I'm doing each day and each week, you can follow it all on my Strava account, so just search for Daniel Lloyd. I've got to say, I'm still really enjoying it. I've been getting to bed quite early for the most part, but then getting up early the next day and getting my exercise done first thing in the morning. I know that's not possible for all of you. Everybody's circumstances are different, but mine allow me to do that. And I've got to say, it's a lovely feeling getting a lot done before 7:30 in the morning. Again, I've had no concrete goals for my running, cycling or weight training or walking. My goal has just been to exercise consistently, to add to my savings as it were, and so far I have achieved that. I've also tried to be consistent with my sleep patterns, but if I look at my Whoop data, I didn't do quite so well in May. So my sleep performance was down by 9% versus April. And I think that's mainly down to being in a different bed for the most part and having different pillows. My average Whoop strain in April and May was quite similar, around 11.5, and importantly, a fair bit higher than those same months a year ago. My average recovery has also been a fair bit higher this year versus last, as has my average sleep performance. My resting heart rate has been lower over the last 2 months than at any other time since I started wearing a Whoop band, which was around 3 years ago. And my heart rate variability is also the highest I've seen since I started measuring it. So most things seem to be going in the right direction. What I've enjoyed most about going to the gym is that whilst you do push yourself to your limit on each exercise, you don't feel exhausted at the end of it like you can do for a long, hard ride or run. In fact, I often feel more energized when I finished in the gym than when I started. Great news for those of you who are considering some resistance training after watching this episode. Just before I go, I would absolutely love to hear your thoughts on strength training and how you've been getting on if you've made some changes to your own lifestyle in recent weeks and months. I will be reading all the comments that you leave below this video. Right, I'll be back very soon with episode 4.
Diet and nutrition. One of the world's most controversial and argued topics. Everyone's got an opinion and everybody thinks they're right. Well, I'm about to add my own opinion by telling you what I eat and drink and what supplements I take and why. Feel free to get involved in the comments. I'm ready for them, I think.
The World Health Organization estimates that 43% of adults worldwide are now overweight. Scientists say that ultra-processed foods are designed to be addictive, causing overconsumption.
Why is nutrition such a controversial subject? Probably because you can find legitimate science-backed reasons why a certain diet is good for you, but also you can find legitimate science-backed reasons why that same diet is not good for you. It's a minefield. And if even the world's leading dietary experts can disagree, it leaves little hope for the rest of us. So my approach has always been to listen to and read a lot about nutrition and then make my own, hopefully informed decisions based on that information. Of late though, there's one thing that almost every dietary expert appears to agree on, and that is that ultra-processed foods are not good for us. Now, most of the foods that we consume are processed. The mere act of boiling potatoes or steaming broccoli means they're a processed food because they're no longer in their natural state. But ultra-processed food is different. A really good example of this is bread. So if bread is made using yeast, water, salt and flour, it's a processed food. But once you add in colourings or emulsifiers or preservatives that are in most of the bread that we eat, it's suddenly become an ultra-processed food. Why are ultra-processed foods so bad for us? Well, there's a whole load of emerging evidence and studies on this, and some really good books, which I'd recommend reading. One of the best is called Ultra-Processed People by Chris Van Tulleken. Put simply though, one of the key problems with ultra-processed foods is that they're not satiating, i.e. you can eat a lot of them and not feel full. You want more. Now the Pringles slogan, once you pop, you can't stop, it's entirely true. Ironically, Pringles' marketing campaign for the last few decades has openly highlighted all that is wrong with ultra-processed food. We can't stop, and that's not our fault. What's in these Pringles, A, doesn't fill you up, and B, leaves you wanting more. I mean, I'm using Pringles as an example because of their slogan, but it applies to almost all ultra-processed food. It's very hard to stop eating it. But whilst most of us are aware of the addictive properties of nicotine, alcohol, or drugs, very few of us are aware that ultra-processed foods have similarly addictive properties.
So one of the things that I have kept a much closer eye on for the last year or so are the ingredients in everything that we buy as a family. So as a general rule, the fewer ingredients there are, the better it will be for you. And I've got a couple of examples for you right here. First up, some different wraps. These are what we use for Jude's school lunches, on school holidays at the moment, but when he is at school. And we found these ones, not affiliated with this company in any way, but if you look at the ingredients on the back, wheat flour, water, extra virgin olive oil, wheat starch and salt. That's all that's in it. I found these ones at the supermarket today, 6 soft kids wraps, are specifically marketed towards kids. And if you look at the ingredients on the back here, there are a heap of them that you won't recognise at all. So the wheat flour, water, rapeseed oil, stabiliser, glycerol, dextrose, acid, malic acid, raising agent, sodium carbonate, salt, emulsifier, mono and diglycerides of fatty acids, preservative, calcium propionate, flour treatment agent, L-cysteine, packaged in a protective atmosphere. So you can see the huge difference in the number of ingredients between these two. Another example I've got for you is almond milk, which you would think can only be made one way. Not so. So 2 ones here. This is the one that I use for my smoothies. Inside this one, ingredients, water, organic almonds, 6%. An alternative one that I've got here, again, has a huge number of ingredients. Water, almond, calcium, sea salt, stabilizers, guar gum, gellan gum, natural flavoring, emulsifier, lecithins, vitamin B12, D2, E, potassium iodide. So again, a huge disparity between 2 products that look pretty much exactly the same. Another good example would be peanut butter. I found some that I was using to have a huge number of ingredients, but you can easily find some that only have peanuts and that's it. Unfortunately, the products with fewer ingredients can often be more expensive. That's certainly true for the products that I've just used as examples. And that's because they often don't have as long a shelf life as ultra-processed alternatives. Now, I understand and I acknowledge that not all of you have the financial means to buy the best food. It's a real problem that we have in modern society, that junk food, fast food, ultra-processed food is often so much more affordable. Hopefully, that will change at some point in the future. Right, could be time to get my helmet back on as I move on now to tell you all what I eat on most days. Just before I do, really important to point out that this is what I've come up with myself for my own current specific needs. I am not a qualified dietitian or nutritionist or doctor. I have, however, acquired a reasonable amount of knowledge over the years, but I've no doubt I'll be learning even more in the future and quite possibly making some changes to what I'm doing right now. Maybe those changes will come because of the comments that you leave me underneath this video. So anyway, here goes. I will start with pre-breakfast. Yes, I've started having some calories before breakfast. There's quite a lot of evidence to support the benefits of intermittent fasting, which means restricting intake of calories to a 6 to 10 hour period each day. But right now, I'm working out at the gym quite a lot with the aim of gaining strength and some muscle mass for reasons I spoke about in the previous episode. It is possible to gain strength without gaining weight, but as I don't have a huge amount of muscle mass, I think it's advisable for me to try and put some on now before it's too late. Anyway, in order to gain muscle, you have to either be in a calorie surplus, i.e. consuming more calories each day than you're burning, or have enough surplus already stored in your body. Now, it's not that you can convert fat into muscle, you can't, but that fat can be used as fuel for exercise, which means that more of the calories you consume can be directed towards building muscle. I mean, I'm not bulking per se, bodybuilder's term, but I am trying to consume a few extra calories each day to give my body the best chance of actually putting some muscle on. So I make this the night before and I'll take it to the gym with me about 6 o'clock in the morning and consume it during my workout, because apparently protein timing doesn't really matter. Carbohydrate timing does after endurance exercise, but with protein, all you want to do is consume an adequate amount and space that fairly equally throughout the day. What's in it? Well, I'm going to go through it now. I'll start with some almond milk, and then I will put a banana into it. So I'm trying to sort of split it almost 50-50 between carbohydrates and protein. I put the aforementioned creatine in, so 1 scoop is 5 grams. Like I said, creatine is not particularly expensive, so this jar cost me, I think it was £28, I just got it through Amazon. It's creatine monohydrate, but it lasts about 6 months if you take 1 scoop each day, so once you get it down to that point, it's not particularly costly. To get some extra calories in, almost finished this, but this is some peanut butter. Not ultra processed, it's literally just mashed up peanuts in here. So I'll add that into the shake as well. And then I have the whey protein powder. I think this scoop is about 25 grams, so I have slightly heaped and shove that in there as well. Now sometimes I will also add some kefir yogurt into it. Alternatively, you can just top it up with a bit of water, but I'll put some kefir in today. Again, really good for your gut. No added ingredients in it, it's just made from milk, effectively. Probably should have shaken that, I think, before I put it in. And just to finish with some extra calories, which I forgot to put out here, give me a second. Some oats. I just shove a few of them in the top as well. And then just put it in the blender. And there we go. I'll just keep that in the fridge and I'll take it to the gym with me tomorrow morning. Creatine is something that Connor is going to dedicate a whole episode to in the not too distant future. So all I'll say today is that creatine is probably the most studied supplement out there, and the more it's studied, the more benefits are found. Muscle performance and strength are the obvious ones, but positive effects on bone mineral density, memory, executive function, and even mood are now being found. And the great thing is that in all the abundance of studies already conducted on creatine, there are very few to no side effects in the vast majority of people. It's a very safe supplement to take with a lot of upside, and it's generally quite affordable too. At my weight, 5 grams a day is all I need. If you're 50 kilograms, you'll need a little less. If you're 100 kilos, a little more. So that's my morning fuel, as it were. I have that at about 6:30 during my gym workout or on my way to work. When I get home from the gym, I'll make Jude's packed lunch for school, a chicken wrap, fresh fruit, and homemade flapjack if you're interested. And then breakfast for me and Lorraine after that. I will eat breakfast just ahead of starting work, so about 8:30. It does take a little longer to prepare than most breakfasts, but I think it's worth it. So I've been having this for a couple of years now. The main part of it is Greek yogurt. Not Greek style, but actual Greek yogurt. So I get the 5% fat version from Lidl's. They're not a sponsor of our channel. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I just quite like shopping there. In fact, that's where all the ingredients for our breakfast come from. Handily, there's a Lidl just next door to the gym that we go to. Anyway, authentic Greek yogurt is a fantastic source of protein. Kefir or skyr yogurt or other options that are just as good for you. I just make sure that I get the unflavoured ones and that there is no added sugar.
Now on top of the yogurt, I will have a variety of fruit, nuts and seeds. I try to have as many different fruits and vegetables and seeds and nuts as possible each week for my gut health and microbiome. The more diverse and wide-ranging, the better it is. So I'll have different types of melon, pomegranate, seeds, nuts, kiwi, mango, strawberries, raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, grapes, etc, etc. You get the idea. I don't have all of those every single day, but I do have a decent variety. And I'll also add a handful of mixed nuts. The ones from Lidl are far more affordable, I found, than most other places. Plus, I'll have some pumpkin seeds and some chia seeds as well. All of those are good sources of protein, essential fats, fibre and antioxidants, etc. And then to top it all off, I'll add some cinnamon because I like the taste of it and because it too has a range of health benefits. Like I said, it is more time consuming than standard breakfasts like cereal with milk, for example, but I definitely think it's worth it. And if I'm heading up to work, I make it the night before to save time in the morning. What I also have when I get back from the gym is a cup of tea. Lorraine and I have had Red Bush tea for about 15 years or more at this point, so that's naturally caffeine free and apparently just as hydrating as water. I also have a decaf coffee with frothed cow's milk. I have about 3 of these per day. Why decaf? Only really because I was trying to get rid of some stimulants that I was consuming at the start of this journey, so I thought I'd give it a go. I felt absolutely no different, if I'm honest. Why cow's milk? Well, I've always had it and I don't feel bloated or have any side effects from consuming it. Next up, 11s. Yes, I do quite often have a snack between breakfast and lunch, and sometimes it's not the healthiest. So I'll often make a chocolate brownie or flapjacks at the weekend. There's a lot of sugar and a lot of butter in both of them, but because I've made them myself using ingredients I've bought and selected myself, they're not ultra processed, they're just processed. So I tell myself, at least, that they're not as bad for me as if I'd bought them at the supermarket. Anyway, if I'm feeling like having something a little more healthy, I'll either have a handful of nuts or some of this 100% chocolate. It's not to everybody's taste, as my family will attest to, but I like it and it's very good for you. For lunch, we will often have leftovers from the night before. For that reason, we tend to make a much larger meal than we'll need in the evening and then put the rest of it in containers for the day after. That way, all we need to do the following day is reheat it for lunch. If I do need to make lunch because we haven't got any, it might be something like a 3-egg omelette with tomato, onion and cheese with a side salad, or maybe scrambled eggs on toast. But as I said, most of the time it's leftovers. So I'll move on now to what we have for dinner. We almost always cook dinner from scratch using whole foods. We never buy packaged meals and we get takeaway at most once a month. That's not to say that we're forcing ourselves to abstain from something that we really crave, but ever since I met Lorraine 19 years ago, that's just how we've eaten, because that's how we wanted to eat. Just before I go any further, I'll say that we are meat eaters. Lorraine has always been quite picky with what meat we do eat, so it'll always be either from our local butchers, or if it's from the supermarket, we normally opt for the organic option. Again, that is not cheap and therefore not affordable to everyone, and I realise that we're in a privileged position from that point of view. And the reason though that we eat meat is because it's amongst the most calorie and nutrient dense foods out there. I think that is particularly important for Lorraine, who's in her early 50s and who doesn't have a huge appetite. It would be really quite hard for her to get the protein intake that she needs without eating some meat some days of the week. Again, I realise there will be alternative opinions on this, and I'm not trying to push this part of as advice to any of you. I'm just explaining what we eat and why. So, a few examples of evening dinners for us, and hopefully by the time this video is released, I might have remembered to film some of them on my phone so you can actually see what they are. So we tend to have a traditional English roast dinner on a Sunday that I will cook. Chicken, beef, lamb or pork with plenty of roast potatoes, Yorkshire puddings and a lot of greens and carrots. I'll often do roasted beetroot as well. On other days, we might have steak with salad and home-cooked chips.
Sometimes we'll have a chili con carne with either rice or baked potatoes. So that can be either with meat or vegetarian bean chili. We might have something like chicken wings with new potatoes and veg. Sometimes we'll have homemade or butcher's burgers with chips and salad. Or we might have a lasagna with a side salad. We also try to have fish one night a week as well. So we have quite a wide range of dinners that we do, but the thing that they all have in common is that they're made with whole foods and we cook them from scratch. We tend to have our dinners at around 6:30 in the evening, sometimes a bit earlier than that at the weekends. And then after that, in the evening, I very rarely snack, but I have started having another protein shake half an hour or so before I go to bed, 25 to 30 grams of whey protein, just to ensure that I'm getting a really good quantity of protein every day. I spoke about the importance of protein in my episode on strength and muscle mass. Before I get onto the supplements I'm currently taking, I just wanted to tell you about my relationship with food and my relationship with food quantities. So I've always been quite lucky in that respect, in that my appetite really closely tracks my levels of exercise. So if I'm training a lot, I feel hungry and I eat more. And there were points during my cycling career where I could just eat and eat and eat and never really feel full. But on the other hand, if I'm not training at all, my appetite plummets. And actually one of the reasons that I started on this journey was because I got to a point where I was exercising so little, I had almost no appetite at all. So I was sitting down for meals and only eating them because I knew I should, rather than because I really wanted to. I knew that wasn't a good place to be in, and I knew that I needed to change that. But I am lucky in that respect, because it does mean it's hard for me to overeat. So I don't look at fast food or chocolate or crisps and have to really stop myself from eating them. However, those of you who've watched the rest of this series will be aware that I do have other vices that I do struggle with, namely nicotine and alcohol. So I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Right then, on to the supplements that I'm taking. Now, I've already mentioned that I'm taking 5 grams of creatine every day for a huge variety of reasons. As mentioned earlier, Connor will be doing an entire video about creatine in the not too distant future, so keep your eyes out on that on our main GCN channel. I also take omega-3. Currently, it's these ones from Performance Lab. 3 capsules daily gives me about 1 gram of omega-3. I also take 2 spoonfuls daily of this extra virgin olive oil, one after breakfast and one after dinner. I know that sounds really weird, so I started doing it after listening to a longevity extremist, I'll call him, called Brian Johnson. There are some incredible benefits to extra virgin olive oil if you buy the right one. So it has to be high in polyphenols, over 400 milligrams per kilo, and high in oleic acid as well. There are a heap of studies showing the wide-ranging health benefits of good quality extra virgin olive oil, enough to make me pay extra to get some of the best quality that there is. The only other supplement I'm currently using is magnesium L-threonate. That's a sleep aid that I take about half an hour before I go to bed. Beyond that, I do take liquid form vitamin D3 in the winter months when I'm not getting as much sunlight. And that's it. That's what my daily food, drink and supplement intake looks like most days. I am still having quite a few beers on Friday and Saturday evenings, and I have no current plans to change or reduce that quantity. Just before I move on to how I've been getting on with my own journey back to fitness and health, I want to emphasise that I, nor GCN, have any affiliation, association or sponsorship with any of the products or supermarkets that we featured in this video. By the way, if you think this video might help anyone that you know, please feel free to share it with them. And if you've enjoyed it, we would really appreciate it if you could click on the thumbs up button that you'll find just down below. So, an update on my own progress. For those of you who've only watched this episode and not the previous ones, I should probably explain that I've made a few fairly big changes in my lifestyle in an effort to increase my health span, having spent a number of years doing my best to undo everything I'd worked on as a pro athlete. I will put a link to the other episodes in the description down below so you can easily find them if you want to catch up. Anyway, this is how my Strava looked for the last month or so.
You can find all of my activities there if you go onto Strava and search for Daniel Lloyd. Up to the 30th of July, which is when I'm recording this, I've done 59 activities totaling 38 hours, so around 10 hours a week on average. Almost 14 hours of that was accounted for by dog walks, only 4 hours was bike riding, only 3 hours was running, and so the dominant activity for me over the last month was weight training. 16 of my activities were at the gym, totaling 15 hours. Now, that was deliberate. Those of you who watched my last episode about the importance of strength, power, and muscle mass for longevity will know why I focused my attention on that. Those of you, though, that watched the previous episode on the importance of VO2 max may well be wondering why I've not spent more time riding or running. It's a good question, and one that I was asking myself, actually, whilst I was out on a ride organised by Canyon yesterday, with Tiffany Cromwell and Valtteri Bottas, to drop a couple of names. So it was only 45 Ks, but on the one half decent climb that we rode up, I didn't feel great. It certainly didn't feel like I'd improved my cardiovascular fitness much over the last few months. But the problem is that I'm not a full-time athlete. Barely any of you watching this will be. And so it is quite difficult, nigh on impossible in fact, to improve everything all at once. VO2 max, strength, power, muscle mass, mobility, diet, sleep, etc., etc. There are only so many hours in the day. So rightly or wrongly, I have focused on gym workouts. I think that's because I'm enjoying them, it's something new, and also because it's probably my weakest point, if you'll pardon the pun. So I spent almost 20 years of my life training full-time for an endurance sport. So in theory, that side of things should improve reasonably quickly once I do start focusing on it. When I start focusing on it is a different question. But I would like to see an improvement in my VO2 max when I take my test again in November, so I'd better not leave it too long. But as I've said from the start of this whole thing, my aim for this is very long term. I'm confident I can maintain the lifestyle I'm currently living for decades rather than just months, and that's mainly because I'm really enjoying it. I've got myself into a nice routine. Then I guess the real test is going to come when it's colder, wetter, and the mornings and evenings are darker. In terms of nicotine intake, not good, also not bad. So I'm currently settled on a middle ground where I'm using those nicotine pouches on Fridays and Saturdays, which is when I'm having a few beers. So 5 days off both. But yes, I have stuck to the 2 evenings of alcohol per week, barring the Sunday that England were in the Euros final, when I broke that rule as well. My sleep has been pretty good, but you can really see the difference between the 5 days that I don't drink and the 2 days that I do. That's partly because I'm going to bed later, but mainly because my sleep is a lot more disturbed during the night because of the effects of that alcohol. At the moment, I guess it's a compromise that I'm willing to make, but that might change in the future. I am planning on stopping alcohol throughout October this year, so I can monitor the differences at the end of that month, just ahead of my final tests. So that's me, but what about you? If you've been making your own lifestyle changes in recent weeks or months, I'd love to hear how you're getting on. And of course, feel free to comment on my diet and nutrition. I'm always really happy to read any opinions on things, so please get involved in the comments section down below. Right, I will be back very soon looking into the benefits of good, consistent sleep. What happens to our brains and bodies when we sleep? How much do we need? Can we sleep too much? I'll be answering those questions in a video that will be out in a few weeks' time. See you then. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about the importance of sleep for well-being and longevity, how we can improve it, what positively and negatively impacts sleep, what the 4 stages of sleep are, whether we all need a similar amount, and if you can actually have too much sleep. Hopefully, it'll be interesting enough to keep you awake. I'll also give you an update on my own journey to health and fitness. And yes, I do always go to bed in a GCN t-shirt with jeans on. Not that long ago, it used to be a badge of honour to get by on minimal sleep. And since many of the publicly known examples of that were incredibly successful people, often world leaders, it sent out a message that sleep was for wimps. Thankfully, that attitude has changed for the most part, largely due to a heap of research that has shown the importance of sleep
and the dire consequences of not getting enough. However, as a species, we are sleeping less now than ever before. To kick things off, I'm going to explain what happens when you sleep. So there are 4 stages of sleep that, on a good night, you cycle through 4 or 5 times. Stages 1 and 2 are the lightest, and it's in the second of those that your body temperature starts to fall, as well as your heart rate, breathing rate, brain activity, and blood pressure. The third stage of sleep is much deeper, and this is where your body releases growth hormone, which is vital for our bones and muscles to repair and grow tissue. That's important for everyone, of course, but particularly if you're an active person, because this is where you repair the damage that you've done through exercise, hopefully then leading to improvements in strength and fitness. During the third stage, it's very difficult for you to be woken, but if you are, you're going to feel quite groggy. That is why it's recommended that you keep any daytime naps to half an hour or less, so you don't reach that deep phase of sleep. The fourth and final stage of sleep is REM, or rapid eye movement, and there's a good reason for that name. In this stage of your sleep, our eyes dart back and forth and our brain is actually really active. It's in this part of sleep that we have the most dreams, but the reason that we tend not to act out those dreams is because our body is rendered temporarily immobile during REM. It's basically paralyzed. Now, this part of sleep is the most essential for the brain, helping functions like memory and learning. And new findings over the last couple of decades have shown that it's here where we effectively hit the save button on anything that we've learned during that day. Most REM sleep occurs in the second half of the night, and it's during that stage of sleep that your breathing becomes more erratic and your heart rate and blood pressure levels are very similar to when you're awake. During sleep, your lymphatic system clears the brain of waste products that have built up during the day. It's kind of like your brain's own deep clean. How does it do it? Well, during the non-REM stage of sleep, the gaps between your brain cells get larger, which then allows fluid to travel between them and flush out any rubbish. It's incredibly clever if you allow it to be. If you fail to get enough sleep, you're going to miss out on some of these very important functions. In adults, a lack of sleep has been associated with a wide range of negative health consequences, including cardiovascular problems, higher risk of obesity and type 2 diabetes, impaired thinking and memory, and mental health problems like depression and anxiety. Poor sleep can also increase your risk of strokes and Alzheimer's, and men who sleep 4 to 5 hours per night have far lower levels of testosterone than men who sleep 7 to 9 hours. When you hear of the potential consequences, it's generally enough to persuade you to start prioritizing your sleep. But if you want more, I've got it for you now. A 2014 US study looked at the effects of the clocks going forward in spring and the clocks going back in the autumn or fall on rates of heart attacks. Over 3 years, there were an average of 24% more heart attacks on the Monday after the clocks go forward and we get an hour less sleep, but 21% fewer heart attacks on the Monday after the clocks go back and we get an hour more sleep. Other studies have shown that the clocks going back led to increased incidence of strokes, road traffic accidents, and even suicides. I'll move on now to tell you all of the benefits of sleep. So sleep affects every aspect of our physical, emotional, and cognitive abilities. There's almost nothing that sleep doesn't influence, and if we get it right, enhance. So it promotes growth, it helps weight management, it keeps your immune system strong, helps heart health, attention span, memory, and it can even reduce your risk of injury. It promotes learning, both by helping you save the things that you've learnt the day before, but also by preparing your brain to soak up anything you're about to learn the following day. The next question is, how much sleep do we need to get these benefits? Well, this is another of those it depends questions. It depends on your age, genetics, levels of exercise, and even your environment.
As a basic guideline, it's recommended that children 5 and younger get 10 to 16 hours of sleep per day, 12 hours if you're between 6 and 12, and 10 hours if you're a teenager. Most adults require between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night, but there are exceptions. Some need 10, whilst others only need 6 to get all the benefits of sleep and none of the consequences of not getting enough. We all know the difference between how we feel after a good or a bad night's sleep though, so trial and error over the years should be enough to give you a good indication of what is ideal for you. Can you sleep too much? According to some studies, yes. And a little surprisingly, the consequences of sleeping too much are quite similar to those of not getting enough. Obesity, diabetes, and heart disease amongst them. That said, there are some nuances to those findings, and most sleep experts would say it's unusual for anybody of healthy mind and body to be oversleeping. Now, before I get on to how you can improve your sleep, I really think it's important to acknowledge that not everybody is in a position to get great sleep every single night. That's just the reality of life. Some things just get in the way. I mean, parenthood is obviously a big one. Night shift workers, they're going to struggle to be as consistent as other people. You might be on regular long-haul flights, or you might live in a noisy area. There are just a lot of limiting factors that can be out of our control during certain periods of our lives. With that in mind, I'll go through a few things that we can try to do to try and improve our sleep. Firstly, make it a priority. If you don't care about your sleep, you're not going to be very good at it. If you want to get good at cycling, for example, you'll focus on going out riding and getting better at it. And it's the same with anything, and that includes sleep. If you really want to get better at it, you probably will. One of the biggest ways to improve your sleep is to have consistent bedtimes and wake times. Again, not possible for everyone, but I was certainly in the camp of changing at the weekends, staying up a bit later in the evenings, then having a lie-in, and I'm finding that's a hard habit to change, if I'm honest. However, there is clear evidence that consistent sleep and wake times lead to better results, and when I say consistent, I mean a range of around an hour. What you do or don't do ahead of sleep also has a large bearing on its quality. So ideally, you want to allow your brain to wind down ahead of going to bed, so less stimulation of the brain with emails, social media, horror movies, etc. Again, that's something I need to make improvements on, although I don't tend to watch much horror movies. It is also beneficial to most people to avoid heavy meals close to bedtime. Most sleep experts will recommend having around 3 hours between your last big meal and your bedtime. But at the same time, you might find that being hungry prevents you from falling asleep. So this is something that we need to experiment with for ourselves to find the sweet spot again. Beyond emails and social media, we also want to avoid other stimulants such as caffeine or alcohol. So alcohol has a massively detrimental effect on my sleep quality, and I'll show you an example later on with some data. With caffeine, there does appear to be a case-by-case basis. So some people can have a post-dinner double espresso and have no problems at all falling asleep. But for most, it's best to stop caffeine intake at around midday. Again, this is something we can all experiment with to see what works for us. It's also recommended that we avoid caffeine for an hour or so after we've woken up. Now, one of the biggest ways to improve sleep is to plan your light exposure, and that doesn't just mean at night, but also in the morning. So your circadian rhythm or body clock responds to light. At the end of the day, when the exposure starts to decrease to light, the brain begins producing more melatonin, which is a hormone that helps with sleep. Once it sees light again, that production of melatonin stops. And so, whilst it might not be obvious, getting out in the daylight within 30 to 60 minutes of waking, even if it's an overcast day, can really improve how you sleep many hours later at night. So if it's sunny, you can get out there for 5 minutes, but you can double that if it's overcast. And yes, it does need to be outside rather than looking at the light through a window. And no, you can't just stand outside looking down at your phone. At the other end of the day, ideally you want to start dimming the lights in your house for an hour or so before you head to bed. Once you do go to bed, it's best to sleep in a pitch black room. Again, I know that's not possible for everybody,
We don't have curtains in our bedroom at home, so I use an eye mask, which is apparently almost as good and definitely a lot less expensive than blinds. On the subject of smartphones, more recent research has shown that the blue light they emit is probably not enough to seriously affect your sleep, but rather it's the stimulation of what you're watching or what you're reading that is more likely to have a negative impact on your sleep, so it's still a consideration. Something else that you can do with light is stand outside for a few minutes as the sun is setting later in the day. That basically helps signal to your body that it's near the end of the day, and also protects you a little bit against the negative effect of artificial light before you go to bed. The temperature of your room could be another consideration, and again, that's something that not all of us can control as much as we would like. But the ideal temperature for most people is just over 18 degrees Celsius or 65 degrees Fahrenheit. There are certain sleep aids in the form of mattress covers that can regulate things for you, but they are quite expensive and they're not something that I've ever personally tried. Now, in terms of exercise, it is best to get exercise done earlier in the day if that's possible. The later in the day you exercise, the more revved up your body and brain is going to be before bed. That is a minor point though, as I know many of you will only get time to exercise in the evenings, and we all know how important exercise is to longevity. And finally, supplements. The general consensus is that you should steer clear of sleeping pills unless your doctor has advised you to take them. But there are a few natural substances that have been shown to aid sleep. Magnesium L-threonate is one of those, around 500 milligrams half an hour before bed. Another is an amino acid, which is called glycine, where around 2 grams is suggested at the same time. Just lastly, you might be wondering whether to invest in a sleep tracker. Again, this is an it depends question. The massive benefit of tracking your sleep is that you can see which habits have a positive effect and which have a negative effect. So if you decide to experiment with anything that I've just talked about in this video, it's a brilliant way to measure whether or not those changes are having the desired effect. Personally, I love data. I like to see how good or bad my sleep was, and I also like to experiment with things to see if I can make it better. On the other hand, if you're the sort of person who's going to get anxious thinking about whether or not you're going to have a good or a bad sleep, it might be something to steer clear of, because anxiety is going to hinder sleep. Right, I will finish with a personal update on my own journey to health and fitness, and I'll start with that example of what alcohol consumption does to my sleep. So this Whoop measures how much deep sleep I've had, how much was REM, how much was light sleep, and how long I wasn't actually sleeping at all, even if I wasn't consciously awake. Now, I already gave an example of that in my last episode, but here's another one from last weekend. We had friends staying down, so I stayed up a bit later than normal and had a few beers. Probably 7 or 8 beers in total. So I had 7.5 hours in bed, which is already less than normal, but for 2 whole hours, I wasn't in any of the useful stages of sleep. My heart rate was significantly higher than normal, in the 60s or high 50s for the most part, versus the 40s or low 50s I'd normally have. My breathing rate was 15 per minute, versus the 12.5 to 13 it would be on an alcohol-free night. And as such, my recovery score was very low. I've certainly had worse sleeps, and actually my REM and deep sleep scores weren't too bad, but it's not something I should be doing too often. It left me in sleep debt ahead of the start of the working week, so I was feeling pretty tired on Monday. Now, it's not been that long since my last episode, so I haven't got a huge amount to update in terms of how things are going, but I went on holiday for a week, so things have slipped a little bit. I did go to the gym a few times, I did a couple of runs, but I was less consistent than I have been for the most part since I started this journey. I drank most days of that week and slipped back into using those nicotine pouches every single day. But we all need a holiday, right? To relax and to switch off. At least that's what I'm telling myself. The thing was, I actually looked forward to getting back to work. Not necessarily for the work aspect, don't tell my bosses, but to get back into a good routine of exercise and sleep and dog walks, etc. around my working day. I've also got a slight shoulder injury at the moment and tennis elbow, so I've had a week or so away from the gym to try and allow them to heal. But that's the great thing about this new goal I've got. It's not specific to an event or to a date. So if I'm injured from the gym, I can do some running or riding.
And if I've got a twinge from running, I can just focus more on the gym. What I'll do if I have an injury from both is a different matter, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. Anyway, you can follow everything I'm doing over on my Strava account. Just search for Daniel Lloyd. Right, I hope you found this episode informative. I mean, sleep is not the most exciting of subjects, but it's certainly one of the most important aspects of our lives to get right if we want to perform at our best. If you've got any advice or tips for me, let me know in the comments below. And as ever, if you think there's anything in this video that would help someone you know, please share this with them. I'll be back soon with another episode, possibly a deep dive on the effects of alcohol. You never know, I might frighten myself enough to cut it out altogether. See you then. Alcohol. It's a poison. The only poison I knowingly and willingly put into my body. A poison I seem to enjoy putting into my body, but it is a poison. Coming up, I'm going to be educating myself and in turn, hopefully you as well, on the effects of alcohol on the human body and brain. What is it? What does it do? And how harmful is it really? Should I cut down further? Should I stop altogether? Will educating myself be enough to encourage me to change my own habits? Let's see. Before I get on to all of that, I just want to briefly outline my own relationship with alcohol. Some of you will resonate with what I'm about to say, others won't. Either way, it will come as no surprise to those of you who've watched GCN for any length of time that I like a beer. Or 6.
I've had at least 8 mineral awards myself.
So what do I like about beer? Well, I love the social aspect. I like nothing more than to sit down with a bunch of friends and shoot the breeze over a few beers. I also love the fact that it removes some of my inhibitions. Contrary to what you might expect of a YouTube presenter and commentator, I am actually quite a shy person. But after a couple of beers, well, I feel more able to converse. More things pop into my head to converse about. And after 6 beers, I might even be persuaded to get on the dance floor or do some karaoke. That part is definitely not a good thing, trust me.
At this age, how are them man still hating? A young boy in a different country, but he never been on vacation.
I would also say I'm a happy drinker. I'm not the sort of person who gets angry after a few beers. On the contrary, in fact, I get less confrontational when I'm drinking. I felt it was important to define my own relationship with alcohol because everyone is different. And I think it's worth you having it in the back of your mind throughout this video and what I'm about to say. So what I'm about to tell you about alcohol doesn't come from a teetotal, health freak influencer. It comes from somebody who is currently assessing their own alcohol habits and deciding what the most appropriate action should be. Now, there will be some of you who watch this video who see yourselves in me. You have similar habits. Other people watching the same video will feel so awful after just a single drink or so awful after a whole night of drinking that they wonder why on earth anybody would want to put alcohol in their body in the first place. First things first then, what is alcohol? Well, I'll keep this to the alcohol that is found in drinks, which is called ethanol. Now, according to the World Health Organization, ethanol is a psychoactive and toxic substance that can cause dependence. Ethanol is made when yeast ferments with the sugars in grains or fruit or vegetables. So for example, in beer, it's made through the sugar of malt or barley, in wine through the sugar of grapes, and in vodka through the sugar of potatoes. Alcohol is a drug, even if the alcohol industry will try to persuade you otherwise. And just like other drugs, it's addictive. It affects the way your brain and body works, and whilst it can make you feel relaxed or happy, it's also a depressant. And it's highly calorific. A gram of alcohol contains 7 calories, a pint of beer over 200. Drink 6 of these and you're halfway or more to your recommended daily calorie intake. And that's even before the kebab. Is alcohol bad for us? Well, it'll come as no surprise to most of you when I say yes. Yes, it is bad for us. Most poisons are.
And more recent research indicates it's almost certainly bad for us, even in very low quantities, contrary to the previous notion that a glass of good red wine a day could help you live longer. More on that later. So I'll go over what happens in the short term when you consume alcohol. Within minutes of consuming an alcoholic beverage, the alcohol will be in your bloodstream. It gets there either through the mouth or stomach lining or through your intestines. If you've consumed food beforehand, that will slow that process down, but you can't slow it down by eating after you've had an alcoholic drink. Over the next few minutes following consumption, more and more of the alcohol that you've consumed will get into your system. Then after around 5 to 10 minutes, you will be starting to feel the effects of that alcohol. And it will affect your balance, it will also affect your mood. How it affects your mood is different from person to person and with different quantities. But for most people, the release of serotonin and dopamine and the reduced activity in the amygdala part of the brain, which controls anxiety and fear, makes you initially happier and more confident. It also reduces activity in the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control. So you can quickly start to see why people do so many stupid things and why so many accidents happen through the consumption of excessive alcohol. Now, you may initially feel warmer with the consumption of alcohol, and that's because it dilates the blood vessels, which are quite close to the surface of your skin, allowing more blood to flow through them. That blood, though, has been moved away from our internal organs and also allows heat to evaporate from our bodies more quickly, so your core body temperature does then start to drop. As you then continue to drink alcohol, your body will attempt to metabolize and get rid of it from your system. Just under 10% of what you consume is exhaled through your breath, which is why you can literally smell alcohol on someone's breath, and also why breathalyzers work. Your liver works overtime trying to metabolize the alcohol in the system, but it can only do that at a rate of around 1 standard drink per hour. So if you drink more than that, the excess alcohol stays in your bloodstream and system, which is why after a higher volume of alcohol, speech can become slurred and vision can become impaired. Alcohol also affects genders in different ways. So in general, women will feel the effects of X number of alcohol units quicker and for longer than men will. That's firstly because on average women weigh less and so have less water in their body and bloodstream, which is where alcohol is normally found. So the more water you have in your body and your blood, the more diluted the alcohol is going to be. That isn't unique to gender though, so if you're a 60 kilogram male, it's more than likely you're going to feel more effects from alcohol than the man that's twice your size. What is unique to gender though is that women tend to have less of the dehydrogenase enzyme, which breaks down alcohol before it reaches the bloodstream. And it's for those reasons that the recommended daily or weekly units of alcohol allowance are lower for women than they are for men. So let's get on to the short-term effects of alcohol. They include reduced inhibition, anxiousness and stress, reduced impulse control and judgment, but increased happiness and confidence. Excessive alcohol can increase the risk of injury through falls or other accidents due to decreased balance and decreased fear. Alcohol also makes some people more agitated or angry. It can lead to memory loss, and most people will experience a hangover the day following excessive alcohol consumption. Now that hangover is caused by dehydration because alcohol is a diuretic. It's also caused by irritation of the stomach lining and increased acid production, reduced blood sugar levels, and also drastically reduced sleep quality, which is something I've spoken about in previous episodes in this series. You're also going to find that your resting heart rate rockets overnight, as does your breathing rate, but your heart rate variability plummets. Now, interestingly, some people are more susceptible to continued regular excessive alcohol consumption simply because of their natural genetics. Whilst alcohol makes some people feel almost immediately drowsy and tired and therefore unlikely to want to drink, there are some people at the very other end of the spectrum for whom alcohol makes them feel more energized
the more that they drink. They have a hyperactive dopamine response, which has been linked to alcoholism. So if you go to a house party, which is full of people just old enough to legally drink, the ones still full of energy in the early hours of the morning are the most likely to have a drinking problem later in their adult life. Contrast to that, the ones that have fallen asleep somewhere in that house by 11 p.m. probably won't. So those are the short-term effects of alcohol, but then most of us know how we respond personally to alcohol. It's the longer-term risks that we either don't know about or we just choose to ignore. Here we go then. Drink excessively for years and you are far more likely to suffer from heart disease or liver damage. So in 2022 over in the USA, alcohol was involved in 46% of liver disease deaths for people aged 12 and over, with that value being higher for men than it is for women. Meanwhile, a study in the Journal of American Heart Association shows that the vast majority of substance abuse-induced heart attacks are through alcohol. There's an increased risk of diabetes, an increased risk of weight gain and therefore obesity, and an increased chance of short and long-term impotence and other problems with sexual performance and fertility. There is also a likelihood of reduced testosterone levels in men. Your chance of getting cancer also increases. So the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is a World Health Organization agency, classifies alcohol as a Group 1 carcinogen and has done now for over 2 decades. What that means is that there is enough evidence to say that alcohol can cause cancer in humans. So stomach cancer, bowel cancer, breast cancer, mouth cancer, throat cancer, and liver cancer amongst them. It's also long been accepted that 8 drinks or more per week for women, 15 or more for men, will negatively affect your brain, how it works, and even how it looks if it's scanned. As such, drinkers are more susceptible to brain-related conditions such as strokes and dementia. Now, given everything that I've just mentioned, it sort of goes without saying that if you're pregnant or breastfeeding, drinking any amount of alcohol is a really bad idea. And it's probably not a good idea for any of us, pregnant or otherwise. So the World Health Organization changed their stance on alcohol in 2023, where it said there's no safe level of alcohol consumption for anybody. Even a small amount comes with health risks, and this falls in line with a number of national public health agencies who are now giving much stricter guidelines when it comes to safe levels of drinking. That was probably quite a lot to take in. It was a hell of a lot for me to think about as I was reading through the literature and studies in preparation for this video. But what then about those studies that have linked low levels of red wine with increased longevity? I mean, can alcohol, a specific type and a specific dose, actually be good for you? So a couple of decades back, some studies emerged that indicated red wine could be good for the heart, particularly if combined with a healthy Mediterranean diet. And I'd say that that was music to the ears to quite a few people. But unfortunately, some of those studies didn't account for red wine drinkers generally being wealthier, more active, more educated, etc. Later studies that did take those things into account didn't find the same benefit of drinking red wine, and the most recent research has shown that even 1 glass of wine a day actually increases the risk of high blood pressure and heart problems. It's not looking particularly good, is it? But don't worry, I persevered, absolutely determined to find something that links alcohol with a positive outcome. And I stumbled upon this from the University of Oxford here in the United Kingdom. Researchers there decided to look at some studies to see whether alcohol may play a role in social cohesion, given its long association with human socializing. Having a strong social circle, that has been for a long time associated with a longer life, so I thought this one looks promising. Now, the opinion of Professor Robin Dunbar of the University of Oxford's Experimental Psychology Department said that the study showed that frequenting a local pub can directly affect people's social network size and how engaged they are with their local community, which in turn can affect how satisfied they feel in life. He continued, and I continued to quote, Our social networks provide us with the single most important buffer against mental and physical illness. While pubs traditionally have a role as a place for community socialising, alcohol's role appears to be in triggering the endorphin system, which promotes social bonding. Are we, or am I, clutching at straws here? Quite possibly, because I think that at this point, the evidence that alcohol in any quantity is bad for you is pretty much irrefutable. And so, like lots of things in life, it comes down to personal choice. For me, I'm currently prepared to sacrifice some of my quality sleep to accept the risks of alcohol that I've outlined in this video for a night or two a week socialising with friends and or family. And yes, I do understand that alcohol shouldn't be necessary to socialise, but I think it's that, historically, which is how the human race sort of got ourselves into this predicament in the first place. I'd say a fair few of us, with more than a bit of encouragement from the alcohol industry, have come to associate alcohol with almost every occasion, good, bad or indifferent. Going to a wedding? Well, let's have a few drinks to celebrate. Getting divorced? Let's have some drinks to drown sorrows. Funeral, same sort of thing. Let's have a drink afterwards. Finish the working day? Let's have a drink to wind down. Music festivals, watching sports, having dinner out, or meeting up with friends and family. The list just goes on and on and on. And in almost all cases, not drinking makes it feel like you are abstaining, as opposed to partaking if you do drink. So waiters, friends, colleagues, they'll ask for justification as to why you're not drinking, but nobody ever asks you why you are drinking. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. But I do think that that attitude is changing and will probably continue to change gradually with future generations. In fact, there are already studies here in the UK that show that 18 to 24-year-olds are the most sober adult age group, which is absolutely fantastic. My oldest son, Ralph, is 22 now and doesn't drink a drop. I've probably put him off. So, if you choose not to drink, more power to you. That is the best decision that you can make for your short and long-term health. If you do continue to drink, it's recommended that you leave as much time as possible between your last alcoholic drink and your bedtime. So believe it or not, and this is why I'm chuckling, the best time to consume alcohol is at breakfast. Not if you've got to work or drive, of course, but if you're on holiday, for example, and you have a few drinks between breakfast through to lunch, and then have the willpower to stop, that's going to be better for you than drinking from dinner through to bedtime. You might look a bit strange though, because that is not a societal norm. I'd love to hear your own thoughts on alcohol. How does your alcohol consumption currently look? Are you going to change it? Have you already changed it? If so, how has that felt? Feel free to get involved in the comment section down below. I'm sure there are going to be some very strong opinions and some remarkable transformation stories. Now, for those of you who've watched this video in isolation and haven't seen the start of this sort of journey that I'm on, I should probably point out that one of the reasons I wanted to make changes in my life was because I was acutely aware that my alcohol consumption was far too high. I wanted to cut it down. And I'll define too high for you. So typically, I would drink 4 to 5 nights a week, and on those nights, I'd have somewhere between 4 and 8 beers, so way too much. If I totted up the units per week that I was having then, it was close to 60 and actually often over that. And that's based on UK units because I've been made aware that a unit of alcohol does differ from country to country. So I have successfully cut down. Rather than drinking 5 nights a week or more, I'm only drinking on 2. Do I feel different? Not particularly. I do feel better about myself because I know that it's better for my body to have reduced my intake. But with everything that I've talked about in this series, it's about the bigger picture. As I said in the very first episode, this is not for me about being perfect. It's not about living like a monk. I would say that my exercise regime is very good, so is my diet, so is my sleep. So I'm doing a lot of things right. So on balance, despite still drinking a bit too much a couple of nights a week, I feel like I'm doing okay. That's not to say that I won't further reduce my consumption in the future.
But the lifestyle I'm currently living is one that I'm confident I can live for decades. I'm not suddenly going to fall off the wagon in a couple of months because it was all too much to stick with on the long term. And I think that's probably a fairly decent ethos for most people. Almost everybody has some sort of vice, something they enjoy that they know isn't necessarily good for them. But as long as we've got almost everything else in our lives in order, we're on the right track. In conclusion, I'm not here to demonise consumption of alcohol, even though it's clearly better to avoid it if you can, but I'm also not here to champion it or to say that it's absolutely fine. It's not. You have to do what you feel is right for you, knowing the latest science and research. This series is really all about looking at that science and what might help us live longer and live a healthier life, and then using that knowledge to make our own informed decisions on how we want to live. Because at the end of the day, what's the point in getting to 100 years old if you feel like you've sacrificed a lot of what you enjoy along the way? Now, despite everything that I have just said, I am going to stop drinking alcohol through October as sort of like a personal experiment that I'm going to document in the next episode in this series. I'm going to be looking at how that affects my sleep, my heart rate variability, my resting heart rate, mood, productivity, consistency in exercise, and perhaps most importantly, whether I can learn to enjoy it. If you'd like to join in with me, please feel free. It's part of Whoop's Sober October that they've done for the last few years. Right, a very brief update now on my own progress since the last episode. There's not actually a huge amount to say. So I have continued to go to the gym a few times per week, generally 4 or 5. I've continued to do some running and some cycling. I've continued to only have alcohol 2 nights per week. I've prioritised sleep, and I've vastly reduced my use of those nicotine pouches. In early November, I'm going to be retaking the health, strength and fitness test that I did back in March for episode 1. So then we'll see how much difference this has all made over the course of about 6 months. Okay, I look forward to reading all your comments, and I will see you soon with the next episode. Oh, by the way, all the beers that you saw me drink in this video were alcohol-free. Unfortunately, we filmed this on one of my non-drink days, which was terrible planning. These could have all been on expenses. See you soon.
Hello, my name is Dan, and I like beer. The trouble is, I've liked beer a little too much in recent years. And so just over half a year ago, I decided to cut down. 2 evenings per week instead of the previous 4 or 5. It felt good. It felt good that I was giving my body and my brain a bit more rest from alcohol each week, and the Friday and Saturday beers felt more earned. I appreciated them more, but it was still a lot. So I would tend to consume on average 6 strong pints of beer on both those nights, which is a total of 36 units of alcohol per week as measured here in the UK. And that is over 2.5 times the recommended weekly allowance on UK guidelines. So, just over a month ago, I took things a step further. I joined Whoop's Sober October Challenge, and I actually went a full 6 weeks without drinking any alcohol. This is what happened to my mood, my weight, my blood pressure, my resting heart rate, my heart rate variability, my sleep, my productivity, and my exercise habits. A little later in this video, I'm going to be talking to an expert about how my key health metrics changed without alcohol. Spoiler alert, not all of them went in the right direction, but most were drastically better. Just before I get onto the stats and the health metrics though, I thought I'd let you know how it felt. I mean, this is obviously an N=1 study, but hopefully you'll find it interesting. Some of you will already have done this, others might be contemplating it or just be intrigued. So anyway, weekend 1 felt quite difficult. I went to the pub with Lorraine and some mates and sipped on alcohol-free beers. Actually, technically, they were 0.5% alcohol, so I did calculate that if I had 10 of them, that would equate to 1 normal beer. I didn't have 10, but that did cross my mind as I lusted after the full-fat beer staring at me from behind the bar. Weekend 2 was a little easier, and by weekend 3, it already felt quite normal. The usual mental countdown to Friday beers had all but gone, but I was still going out, albeit generally heading home earlier than I would do normally, which is no bad thing. At the end of the month, I had got so used to it that I decided to continue a bit longer, finally having my first alcoholic beverage on the 8th of November. How did that feel? I'm going to tell you later on. Now, in terms of my state of mind, I wouldn't say there were any dramatic changes, but that in part is probably because I didn't feel bad before. I rarely get hangovers or any kind of brain fog, at least I didn't think I did. However, what I did find was that I was far more productive on a Saturday and Sunday morning. I had more motivation to get up and do stuff as opposed to staying in bed. And as such, it was my biggest month of exercise for a long time. I've actually been sad enough to crunch the numbers on a spreadsheet, and in October I spent 25% more time exercising than I'd averaged the previous 6 months, which is when I started this journey to getting healthier and fitter. A couple of other things that I've noticed. Firstly, I'm going to bed earlier and getting up earlier. I would say that on average I've been waking up at 6 a.m. and the lights are normally out well before 10. Secondly, I have realised how much alcohol is involved in things that I'm looking forward to. As in, I've been very much looking forward to events because they involve alcohol. By the same token, I also think that's why I've been going to bed earlier. There doesn't seem as much point in staying up if I'm not drinking. So that is definitely something I need to work on, because I should absolutely be looking forward to things that don't involve alcohol, and I shouldn't see alcohol as the only reason not to go to bed. That's utterly ridiculous. I would also say that I have procrastinated less. I seem to get more things done way before the deadline for doing them, which is something I do normally struggle with. And although I've said I don't experience brain fog with alcohol consumption, I did find I was less forgetful. Tasks and things on my mental to-do list seem to spring to the forefront of my mind more often. Have I enjoyed it? I'm going to let you know that later on as well. But first up, I'm going to talk to Dr. Kristen Holmes. She is the head of global performance, principal scientist at Whoop. And as you can tell from that job title, she is a very busy woman. So I am very appreciative that she's taken some time to analyse my data. I'm going to start by just asking what the main headlines are, really. You know, I went to do Sober October. I did Sober October. I started actually a little bit before the start of the month, and I went a week into November. So it was just under 6 weeks in total. You know, I could see some differences myself, but it'd be nice to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, on how big the differences were.
Yeah, well, there were massive changes in your resting physiology, clinically significant changes, which is cool to see. You know, when you just compare basically your month of October to an average of your previous 3 months, looking at resting heart rate, for example, you know, your average resting heart rate was 52 beats per minute, and that's with drinking. And there are, you know, a lot of other variables that we were not able to control for necessarily. But, you know, this experiment was basically you were drinking July, August, and September. And then the experimental time frame was, of course, the month of October when you weren't drinking. So during that control phase, you know, you're drinking alcohol and your resting heart rate was 52 beats per minute. And during the month of October, your average resting heart rate was 46 beats per minute. That's like the average resting heart rate of what would be like a 26-year-old. Okay. So, you know, you're a 44-year-old male. So, you know, that you think about like just how that actually decreases your biological age potentially, right? Like, and there's lots of different, you know, biological markers that you would, you know, factor in when you're looking at your biological age, but resting heart rate is kind of a big one, right? Because we know it ladders up to all-cause mortality.
Yeah, I did notice that it took quite some time to go down. So during October, I noticed it took, you know, it went down to what I saw as my baseline, a sort of 46, 47, maybe a 45. But towards the end of October and start of November, it got down to 43 for a couple of nights in a row. So it seems like it takes quite a long time for it to completely get out of your system and to reset almost, and recalibrate.
Recalibration, your body has to get used to sleeping differently. Your body, you're like everything about a body that has poison in it versus a body that doesn't is different, right? So I think to your point, that recalibration is not just on, things that you can perceive, but things that are happening at, like your cognitive and your physical abilities, but things that are happening actually on a cellular level. So I think that's when it gets really interesting, right? Like you're basically, by abstaining from alcohol, you're creating a situation internally that is safe, right? Like alcohol creates a really unsafe internal environment and causes a lot of friction in terms of the ability of your cells to communicate with each other. And in that lack of communication, and oftentimes the miscommunication between cells, is really the basis for aging and the basis for disease. Alcohol is basically, it's water and fat soluble. So what happens is it doesn't just like attach to the receptors of the cells, it actually penetrates the membrane and gets inside the cell. Once it's inside the cell, it gets converted to acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde, of course, is just a toxin. It's poisonous, right? So it's essentially poisoning the inside of the cells. So that can really explain all of the negative effects that come with alcohol, what we know as like hangover and, all the symptoms associated with your body trying to clear the poison, out of the kidneys.
In terms of sleep, again, no surprise that I slept better. In part that was because I was tending to go to bed more consistently, like even at the weekends where I'd normally stay out. I know that's a big thing of yours, the consistency.
I know, I talk about that all the time.
One of the things I noticed was that I think I got less restorative sleep on average per day through October than I was the previous 6 months on average. Would that be because my body had less to recover from because I wasn't putting it through the same thing?
So your restorative sleep on nights that you're drinking and the 2 nights after is well below the average of what we would want for you. What we consider is probably healthy restorative sleep. So I think what you're seeing is basically your body ends up, even though you're spending decent time in bed, you're not getting that restorative sleep. So what happens, you end up overcompensating and dropping in, you'll go from like 18% sleep efficiency on drinking nights. You get through that period, the body, the alcohol gets out of your system. And then on that 4th day, you're dropping in at 55% because your body is so deprived of, REM and slow wave sleep that it just, to your point, kind of overcompensates and ends up spending, extra time to kind of make up for that lost period of sleep. And you can't really make up for it per se, because when you're not dropping into those deeper stages of sleep, certain genes aren't turning on, right? And it doesn't mean they're going to doubly turn on 4 days from now when you're making up for it, right? So when I say make up for lost sleep, take that with a grain of salt.
I was going to ask you a more general question. So I think a lot of people watching this they'll say, well, Dan's drinking 6 strong beers per night. It's quite extreme. But I only have a glass of red wine 5 nights a week or 4 nights a week or whatever it might be. What would you expect with someone who only occasionally drinks, and when they do it, it's not as many units as me? Would you expect to see anything similar if they went from, let's say, 4 glasses of red wine per week to none?
You'll see improvements for sure. And it's really the big key is how close to bed is that glass of wine. And it doesn't sound, and most glasses of wine are not 4 ounces, right? Or 6, they're usually somewhere around 7 to 8 ounces, right? So it's like it's a pretty big glass of wine, right? And if it's within 2 hours of bedtime, it's going to meaningfully impair sleep. Just 1 glass. So, and the older you get, the worse it gets for you. I think we say, oh, just 1 glass of wine, but we see in the data, like it does have a statistically significant impact on resting physiology. It's just 1 glass within 2 hours of bedtime. 1 glass within 2 hours of bedtime. So if you want to make, improvements, that is the quick to your cardiovascular functioning and your capacity to, bring it in the gym and, just more consistent energy levels. That is a quick win, easy.
One of the things I didn't touch upon with Kristen then was my blood pressure, because that is not a Whoop metric. However, I took it myself pretty much every day through late September all the way through October and at the start of November. I'll give you the results of that because they were really quite striking for me. So at the end of September and through the first week of October, my average blood pressure was 133/79. Not awful, but also not ideal. So the ideal blood pressure is to have 120 or below on the systolic upper number and 80 or below on the lower number, which is the diastolic. However, I did then start to see quite a significant change around a week or 10 days after I'd stopped drinking alcohol. So if I then take the average blood pressure I had from the 7th of October through to the 2nd of November, that was 120/68. And I was quite systematic in my measurement of it. I'd sit down and relax for 5 minutes, take it once, rest another 5 minutes, take it again, rest another 5 minutes and take it again, and then take the average of those three. Wasn't always done at the exact same time every day, but I would estimate that in those 2 periods, the average time of day I took it was roughly the same. But in summary, with the data, in October, I didn't have a single day in the red. My average heart rate variability increased by 30%. My resting heart rate decreased by 12%, my sleep performance increased by 10%, and my blood pressure came down too. All those were versus September. Pretty conclusive then, really. The data doesn't lie. Almost all of my metrics went in the right direction, significantly in the right direction. For those interested, we're going to put a couple of links in the description below this video. One is to the spreadsheet that I kept from late September through October and the start of November, and the other is to Whoop data from the past few months. With both, you can see in black and white what the effects were on my sleep, recovery, and general health. One of the things on that spreadsheet is my weight, which I haven't discussed yet. So I weighed myself regularly throughout October, and from the start of not having alcohol to the day I drank again, my weight was roughly the same. And if anything, it went up, particularly in the middle of the month for some reason. However, I should caveat this by saying that I didn't want to lose weight. I'm actually currently trying to gain some muscle, and so whilst I'm eating healthily, I am trying to keep a decent number of calories coming in each day. But also on weight, I really think it's a personal thing. Despite all the calories in beer and the so-called empty calories of alcohol, my weight has always remained quite stable, even during my years of very heavy drinking. But I know there are a lot of people who pile the pounds on when they drink, so I guess I'm fortunate that I don't. One of the reasons for that could be that I rarely snack when I'm drinking. I'm not the sort of person who craves crisps or nuts or chips or a kebab when I'm on the beers. The pints of lager just seem to fill me up enough. But it could also just be a genetic thing as well. My family are all what you could describe as skinny. Right then, time to answer that question. Did I enjoy it? Well, it saved me money, so that's a positive. But in all seriousness, I think I did enjoy it, but I couldn't tell you exactly why. I kind of like the routine of it, the routine it allowed me to get the rest of my life into. It was also nice to be able to drive to and from social occasions rather than thinking how we were going to get there and back. And I did enjoy my newfound ability to get things done without procrastinating. Did I miss alcohol? No, not really, which is weird because I really enjoy drinking with mates and have done for about a quarter of a century at this point. But I found that abstaining very quickly became the new norm in the same way that daily exercise has become a new norm for me since I made a few changes earlier this year. Habits don't seem to take long to form, whether they're good ones or bad. Right, my first beer back then. I am just about to have my first beer for 6 weeks. 5 weeks and 6 days. It is a Hackney Boogie Van beer or something. There we go. There's the rain. Waiting for me to drink again. Thought I'd document it because I'm sure you're all very interested. So here we go.
First one. He's pissed.
It's good.
I am about to have my first beer since 20 minutes ago.
Second one.
Exactly, yeah.
We do that tomorrow.
And I'm gonna have
Triple d'Anvers.
I have lost count of how many beers in I am. 6. Beer number 10. That was actually a bit of a strange experience. I think I had a slight fear in my head. Firstly, a fear that I'd be completely drunk and incoherent after 2 pints. And secondly, that I would have lost what I stupidly see as the superpower of not getting a hangover. What actually happened was that I felt great after 2 pints, but probably not quite so good a few drinks on from that. My problem is, and always has been, that once I start, I don't tend to stop. And the next morning, all good, thankfully. I managed to get myself up fairly early and go and do the park run. Right, I'm going to answer a couple of questions now that I think you might have. Firstly, how did I go about doing it? Well, I didn't do anything special. I didn't do that thing of throwing out all the alcohol from the house or pouring it down the drain. I'd made a plan to do Sober October back in April, so I had a long build up to it, and when I put my mind to something, there's not much that gets in the way of me keeping to the goal. I'd also say that it's probably a little easier to abstain at my age and in my specific situation. Firstly, I'm just not going out as much as I was in my 30s or 20s, so there's less temptation. Secondly, my wife Lorraine doesn't drink much, so it's not as though I had to resist the temptation to join in with her. Thirdly, I don't live in a city, so I'm not walking past bars and restaurants or anything like that on my way home. And lastly, I don't have many friends, so I'm not getting pestered to go out. I'm joking, partly, but on that point, I have seen a few things on social media that say you find out who your real friends are when you quit alcohol. And by that, I think they mean that when you quit, the people that don't keep in touch with you or that you don't keep in touch with are not real friends. They're just drinking buddies that will drop you like a stone if you go sober. I'm calling bullshit on that. As in, it makes drinkers sound like awful, shallow people. But I would say that this situation applies to anything that is a commonality between people. If you're a long-time cyclist and you suddenly stop cycling, there's a good chance that over time, you're going to lose touch with some of your cycling friends. That doesn't mean they're sad, shallow human beings. It would be the same with golf or netball or even work colleagues when you move jobs. If you move on from something that was a big part of your life, your social network is likely to change. Right, what's next? Well, I'm going to contradict myself here slightly. By that, I mean that I am planning on having more weeks and weekends without alcohol, and I'm planning on having more extended periods without it as well. I'll do dry January, and I might even carry on through February. Why is that contradicting myself? Because earlier on in this video, I said I didn't feel hugely different without alcohol than with, but there must be a subconscious benefit going on if I'm considering continuing down this track. Obviously, there's the very clear result of better health. My metrics are looking a lot better. And as I mentioned in my previous video about alcohol, all the evidence suggests that it's bad for you in any form or any quantity. Anyway, I do want to change my relationship with alcohol so that it's not a regular Friday and Saturday thing week in, week out. How that looks, I haven't really figured out just yet, but I will do so. Also, I've read in lots of places and listened to lots of people who say you need to try it for a few months to really see what the differences and benefits are, so I'd also like to give that a go. Now, this is normally the part where I tell you how my journey to fitness and health is going, but I'm not going to this time. Why? Because in 2 weeks' time, you'll be able to see all the results of everything I've changed over the last 7 months. As I record this, I've actually already retaken the health and fitness test that I did back in March, so stay tuned for that video, which will be released on GCN on Saturday the 30th of November, so 2 weeks from now. Right, let me know your thoughts on alcohol and abstinence from it. I know there are a lot of strong opinions on both sides with this, but I'm always interested to read those opinions, and I know a lot of viewers are too. So let me know your thoughts and experiences in the comments section just down below. And just before I go, if you've enjoyed this video, it would make a big difference to us if you could share it with friends or family that you think would be interested. And if you really enjoyed it, there is now the option of giving us a super thanks. You'll find that icon just below this video. Thanks everyone, cheers, and see you in a fortnight.
Up, 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 up. Good, Dan. Push, 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 push. Still there, still there. Last one, Dan.
7 months ago, I decided to change my life. Not dramatically, but just change a few things in an achievable way to get myself back on track, to give myself the best chance at a long and healthy life. Why? Because I'd veered off that track. Over the 12 years since my career as a professional cyclist ended, I'd been drinking too much, exercising too little, consuming nicotine, and often burning the candle at both ends. I wouldn't say I was completely lost, I just needed to retrace my steps slightly to get back on the right path. And I think I've achieved that. But today I'll find out for sure, because I'm going to retake the health and fitness test that I did at the start of this journey. And I'll also let you all know what I'm planning on doing next.
Happy to get off, or do you want to keep staying?
No, I'm happy to get off.
Good work.
I will start by quickly recapping what those tests were and how I performed back in April. At the time, I weighed 73.6 kilograms, which is 162 pounds or 11 stone 8. I had a blood and urine test, the results of which looked good, and then a DEXA scan, which gives you the most accurate body composition analysis out there. I had my waist measured as well, because that's a simple, cheap and easy way to predict health span, as well as my blood pressure and an ECG. I then went through a series of strength tests, including grip strength, which is another great predictor of longevity, and then last, but definitely not least, I performed a VO2 max test, an excruciating ramp test in which the intensity gradually increases until you reach exhaustion. Somewhere just before you faint, you'll record your VO2 max, which is the maximum amount of oxygen that your body can use. Again, this is seen as a key indicator of longevity. Since then, I've made a few key changes to my lifestyle. I've reduced my alcohol consumption from drinking heavily 4 to 5 nights a week down to 2, and through October and the start of November, I didn't drink alcohol at all. I've increased my protein intake and my total calorie intake in an effort to gain some muscle mass, and I tried to prioritise my sleep more and do a few things to make my sleep better. I've also given up nicotine twice. I'm currently 8 weeks without nicotine, but I'd say that was the change I found hardest. Probably the biggest change though was that I just started moving again on a regular basis. I mean, I have always done quite a lot of walks because we have dogs, but beyond that, my exercise regimen was, I'd say, sporadic, to say the least. So I started doing more running, some cycling, and I joined a gym. I'll be a bit more specific in what I've done from an exercise point of view. So I've totted up everything that I've logged on Strava since the start of April, and this is what I've done over the last 7 months. I have averaged just under 6 hours a month of running, or 1 hour 23 minutes per week. That's been a total of 514 kilometres over 75 runs, so an average of 2.5 runs per week. Since joining a gym at the start of May, I've averaged just over 3.5 sessions per week, with an average of 52.5 minutes per session. That's a little over 3 hours per week, solely focused on strength and resistance training. I don't do any cardio in the gym. I've done a little bit of riding, but I haven't fallen back in love with the bike in the way that I'd hoped. In total, I've done 900 kilometres, but that works out at only 4 rides per month and not quite a ride per week. Average duration per ride was 1 hour and 20 minutes. And finally, walking. I do a lot of walking with my dog. So over the 7 months, I recorded 560 kilometres of walks, so just under 20 Ks a week. That worked out at almost 14 hours a month, or 3.25 hours per week, almost all quite brisk walking and off-road. That doesn't cover all my walking, obviously. I mean, there have been times where I've got up in the middle of the night and walked to and from the toilet and not uploaded to Strava. Did those wheeze even happen? Who knows? So, in total, I've done 255 hours of exercise in 7 months, which is 36 hours per month, 8.5 hours per week, or an hour and 11 per day. Without the walking though, it's 157 hours total, 22.5 hours per month, 5.25 hours per week, or 45 minutes per day on average. So a fair bit, but at the same time, very achievable given my current circumstances. The question is, has that exercise, have those changes had much of an effect? Today is the day that I will find out. I'm back in Manchester and heading to the Nuffield Institute of Health and Performance to meet with Connor, who many of you will remember from the first episode of this series. He's going to be putting me through the same series of tests and hopefully telling me some results that I can be proud of. I'm nervous, genuinely. I really want there to be some improvements, firstly for my own satisfaction, but mainly to show what can be achieved in just over half a year.
So for the scan, your head's going to be up that way, your legs are going to be down here. Try and get that white line to split your body in half, and then just mind your head on the way down.
As a reminder, a DEXA scan gives you an advanced and very accurate breakdown of your body composition. It uses low-dose X-rays to measure bone density, fat mass, and lean mass. My results from April were okay, but obviously I'm hoping to see some improvement.
That's all you. So you can get completely dressed.
Thank you. I'm going to interrupt the test just there because I've had some time to digest the DEXA scan numbers and I wanted to give some early context to the results. So in 7 months, I have lost 1.76 kilograms of fat, which is just under 4 pounds. And I'm going to show you what that looks like in animal fat. It's a lot, isn't it? It's a lot of fat off a body that didn't appear to have much fat to lose. Overall though, I've gained weight. Back in April, I was 73.9 kilograms. In the test I've just done, I was 76.2, which means that I've accomplished my goal of putting on some muscle mass. And I'll show you how much using some meat. I put on a total of 4 kilograms of muscle, which is that plus this separate piece. I'll explain why that's here a little bit later on. That is just under 9 pounds incidentally, and I'm really pleased with that. Not just because I think I look better for it, but because muscle mass is a crucial part of longevity. We will all lose muscle as we age unless we do something about it. Now, I also want to show you what those losses and gains look like per month. So, I come over here, I've lost an average of 250 grams of fat each month. I'm just going to weigh it out. So that looks like that, 248 grams. And I've gained 570 grams of muscle, which is this separate piece here, on average each month. Now the reason I wanted to represent it like this is to emphasize the importance of consistency over time. At the end of a month of changing your lifestyle, you might not be able to see any significant changes. They will be there, you will be starting to change, but you might not be able to see those changes in a mirror or on the scales, because by volume, muscle weighs far more than fat. So don't be despondent if you don't see big changes very quickly. Just stick with the plan. I think that is particularly important as we come towards a new year and therefore people making New Year's resolutions. I sincerely hope that what I've achieved here motivates some of you out there to make some changes that you're confident you can maintain for the long term. Because long term, you can completely change yourself into someone unrecognizable. And I mean that from both a health and an appearance point of view. Right, back to the tests.
efforts, 58.6. Good. So stand nice and still. We can make a start in 3, 2, 1. Let's go down. Pull, 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 pull. Up, 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 up. Pull, 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 pull. And rest. 3, 2, 1. Let's go. Drive, 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 drive. Up, 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 up. Good, Dan. Push, 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 push. Go on and relax. We'll have a 60-second break after that, and then it's 5 reps, all out max, hard as you possibly can. Max effort. Kick, 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 kick. Up, 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 up. And pull, 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 pull. Good start. One down. Push, 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 push. Still there, still there. Last one down. Max effort. One. Drive, 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 drive. Yes. Pull, pull, pull. Still there. One down. Drive, 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 drive.
I mean, the good thing with all these strength tests is they're all short. Another interlude, just before we move on to the most painful of the tests, the VO2 max. I want to say a huge thank you to Whoop, who sponsored the first episode and this, the final episode in this series. It was genuinely the data from this small strap on my wrist that truly made me aware of what I was doing to myself with consistent heavy drinking and nicotine consumption, along with a lack of exercise. The difference for me, and it seems to be the same for most people, between consuming alcohol and not, is massive. If you don't see it with your own eyes, you won't believe it. And it's not that you tell the app what you've drunk and that it takes that into account before it gives you a readout. It gives you your readouts without knowing. Your body tells the Whoop how it's feeling, and the Whoop then communicates that to you in data form. Anyway, beyond helping me personally, it's partners like Whoop that allow us at GCN to make such a huge amount of free-to-view content. So thank you to them. Right, time for some pain.
Bit of a warm-up just to get you up to cadence. We normally ask you to hold a cadence around 85 to 90, but whatever's kind of comfortable for you.
Yep.
Put the wattage up by 5 every 15 seconds, which means you clear 20 watts every minute. And we'll just keep going until exhaustion, until you can't go anymore.
Yep. VO2 max is the maximum rate at which someone can utilize oxygen. The more oxygen your body can consume or use during very high intensity exercise, the higher your VO2 max. There is a very strong correlation between VO2 max and lifespan, and so I'm hoping that my efforts over the past few months have reversed the fairly drastic downward trend that I've seen in my VO2 max over the past decade. Why is it so painful? Well, to accurately test it, you need to steadily ramp up the intensity of exercise until you reach exhaustion. Here goes.
Looking good. 3, 2, 1, that's 9 minutes. It's 300 watts now. Cadence is still holding nicely. That's 10 minutes down, really good. You can see it's getting tough, but that cadence is still holding, so just really dig in. Anyway, just take it minute by minute now. 30 seconds left of this stage. Try and get to the end. 12 minutes. Try and hang in there as long as you can, Dan. That cadence is starting to drop slightly. Can we get it back up? Last little push, mate. Come on. Push, 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 push. Let me let mascots in. You okay? Really good work. Well done. Happy to get off, or do you want to keep spinning?
No, I'm happy to get off.
Good work.
Cheers. With all the tests completed, it was time to get a rundown of the all-important results. Am I stronger? Am I fitter? And if so, by how much? Connor had been keeping me in suspense. Connor actually hasn't told me my VO2 max scores just yet. He's keeping it for on camera. So I'm going to hastily go down to what they were. 54.8.
Yep, so improvement in your relative VO2 max. And then you can see your absolute has improved as well to 4.12. So your relative VO2 max has improved by just less than 5%. And your absolute VO2 max is improved by around 7%. So
oh, great, I'm pleased with that. Explain the difference to the public. The absolute takes out the weight part of the equation because VO2 max normally millilitres of oxygen per kilogram per minute.
Yeah, expressed in relative terms. And then if you take out the kilogram element, you can just look at the absolute VO2 max. The thing is, depending on people's size, weight, etc., their absolute values might be completely different, which makes it not very comparable for like normative values.
I am looking at a couple of red numbers here on the right.
Yeah.
Which ones were they?
They're your strength parameters, specifically on the IKD, the isokinetic dynamometer, looking at your
Oh, it's a leg extension and hamstring.
Yeah. One thing I would say is don't be too alarmed about those bright reds. First of all, you had pretty good scores back in March anyway, so you're already pretty strong. And then these values here are also expressed as a percentage of your body weight. So the fact that you've increased your kilos a few more, it just means that that muscle mass you've put on isn't quite yet being translated into like functional strength, which is absolutely fine. And then when we look at grip strength, they've actually gone up by quite a bit. Your right and left arm have got quite a bit stronger.
And that's probably representative of me having done more upper body stuff at the gym. So, good news on my strength and fitness, but I still needed to get the results of my blood and urine tests. For that, I went to Nuffield's HQ in London to speak to Dr. Davina Denischik, their charity and medical director. So, looking at the DEXA scan and the body composition, I've obviously been given the good news already, and I'm very pleased with the results. But in terms of the amount of fat that I lost, does the DEXA scan tell me how much was subcutaneous fat, I think you call it, and then the visceral fat, which is what sits around your organs?
It does. It breaks down the DEXA scan between the visceral and the subcutaneous fat. And what we tend to see in people is that you will fill up your subcutaneous fat first to the level that's personal to you, and then your visceral fat part is your overflow. So once you're fat on the outside, you'll then start to put it on the inside. And everybody's got a different level of their fat on the outside, and that's why you see different body shapes and you don't quite know what's happening in the middle in your visceral fat. Now, you were quite lean, so you naturally will put things down into your subcutaneous area before it goes into your visceral area. You've got a really nice content for your subcutaneous, but you did have about 450 grams of fat sitting in the inside, laying down on the liver, pressing on the organs, which for a lean person is not a lot in there, but it's still going to be having an effect. Yeah. And you've lost about 6% of that overall.
Okay, so 1% per month. keep going on that trajectory.
I can't say it was that trajectory. I don't know when it happened, but that's the result.
Yeah. How far off do you think I am from winning some national level bodybuilding competitions at this point?
Quite far.
Oh, quite. Give me some confidence, yeah. So moving on from the DEXA scan body composition results,
Let's start with grip strength, first of all. So grip strength is interesting because we always think, oh, I'm strong, therefore my grip strength is going to be great. The research actually shows that grip strength is a really good indicator of actually just overall health and future risk of poor health. So it's something we use in certain populations to engage them into thinking about health and strength in general. So it's not just about how strong you are, it's how the body is working from a physiological point of view. And then obviously there's the targeted strength that you're talking about, like your leg strength. We can do exercises and weights to improve our strength, but the nutritional background is really important too. So if you're eating right, you've got to be eating the right levels of protein for you in terms of the calorie needs you've got in terms of moving forward to improve that strength.
And then finally, the ones I haven't seen at all yet is the blood tests. Again, I believe they weren't in a particularly bad place when I did them back in March. Have there been any changes whatsoever?
Where you started, they were pretty good. So we looked at your bone marrow, first of all. That's all your blood cells. Red blood cells, white blood cells are the main types of blood made by bone marrow. The other thing we looked at, I think is the interesting one, is your lipid profile, your cholesterol profile. And when we test that, we're looking at total cholesterol, then a breakdown of good stuff and the bad stuff. Some cholesterol is good for us. HDL cholesterol, that's the good stuff. I call it as kind of the vessel road sweeper. Comes in, mops things up, stops you having blockages, and therefore it's the good cholesterol, happy cholesterol. The other type of cholesterol though, that is the bad stuff. Generally made up of LDL, low density lipoprotein cholesterol, and triglycerides. Both of those together against your ratio of high cholesterol is your cholesterol ratio that predicts your risk of future heart attacks and strokes. Now, when we started, you were in a really good place in terms of your overall lipid profile. There was nothing on there that abnormal. But as we've retested and we move to the end of the results this time, actually what we've seen is a really nice reduction in your total cholesterol, and that has been driven by a reduction in your triglycerides, but also your LDL cholesterol, your bad cholesterol. So you've got a really nice change in your body composition, which has rebalanced out in your cholesterol profile.
Great. Well, thank you very much again,
Amazing.
Davina, for your time. I appreciate it.
No worries, lovely to meet you.
Mission accomplished, I would say. In that I have successfully made some positive changes to my lifestyle, successfully cut out some unhealthy habits, and the benefits are already evident. However, this mission never had a finish line. I've never looked at these tests as the end goal. They were always going to be an affirmation that things are going in the right direction. I've changed my habits in a way that I feel I can sustain for a really long time, in a way that doesn't feel like I'm living like a monk, in a way that doesn't make me feel like I'm sacrificing any of life's enjoyment. And I would like to say, I'm really bloody proud of myself. I mean, I don't generally like to blow my own trumpet, but I'm genuinely proud of what I've achieved and how I've turned things around. I am back on the right track now, and that feels good. I feel healthier, and I prefer what I see in the mirror. And just to be clear, and you probably won't believe this, but no steroids were used in the making of these pecs. They're entirely natural. Told you, you wouldn't believe it. What I'm most pleased and surprised about, though, is how much this journey has resonated with so many of you. I was going to make changes to my lifestyle whether I documented them or not. I wasn't sure how well it would go down because, well, it's not really cycling related and we're a cycling specific channel. But I've been blown away by all the comments and messages I've received over the past few months. Now, in episode 1, I encouraged you all to join in with me. And I really hope that those of you who did have also seen positive results. Please do let me know how you've been getting on. I'm going to be reading every single comment that's left underneath this video. On the other hand, if you're watching this and it spurred you on to do something similar, you can see more details as to exactly what I've been doing these past few months by watching the previous videos in this series. We'll put links to them in the description down below. Plus, you can also look at my Strava account where I've logged all the exercise I've done. Just search for Daniel Lloyd over there. There are a couple of things that I would like to emphasise to those of you who are considering making similar changes to your own lifestyle. Firstly, that similar results should be achievable even if you don't have a background in professional sport like I do. In fact, you might see much bigger losses in fat and bigger gains in muscle mass, VO2 max and other health parameters because you're currently further away from your own limits. Secondly, you don't need to spend loads of money on baseline health tests. For example, if used correctly, fat calipers, which are very affordable, can give an accurate fat percentage reading. Any strength gains in the gym can be measured simply by looking at how much weight you're able to move, and any fitness gains can be monitored by looking at the power or speed at which you're cycling or running for a certain heart rate. As I've said throughout this series though, everyone's circumstances are different. Some have more disposable income than others, some have more time constraints, some have more responsibilities, etc., etc. So I don't want to sit here and say, look, this is what you can all achieve. However, I do hope it shows what can be achieved if you can make the time and you do have the motivation and desire. Thirdly, I've done this all publicly, and I've had a lot of people say that they thought it was in some ways brave and courageous to do it like that. But I feel it's helped me doing it that way. I've always known that lots of people would see my end results, and that's made it easier to get out and run or ride or go to the gym if I was lacking a bit of motivation to get out the door. And on that point, I think it's probably not a bad idea to tell a couple of your close friends of your own plans. That way, if you don't stick to those plans, it's not just yourself that you're answering to. Now, I promised I would let you know what's next. What's next for me is more of the same. I will continue to try and do some sort of exercise on most days. I'll continue to try and get stronger. I'll continue to eat healthily, to consume enough protein, and I'll try not to slip back into excessive regular drinking and using nicotine. I might also find a couple of events to use my newfound fitness and motivation at as well. And I would also like to start working on improving my flexibility, as that's likely to get worse as I age as well. My big goal though is to reduce my time on this. I am a proper smartphone addict and it's really not good. All right, could I please ask you all a favour before I finish? Sharing this video with people you think would enjoy it and or benefit from it would make a massive difference to us, as would clicking on the thumbs up button if you thought it was a good content. And if you've really enjoyed it, there is now the option, nothing obligatory of course, to give us a super thanks. You can find an icon for that just below this video if you scroll across the icons. Okay, thank you ever so much for watching. That brings me to the end of this series. However, if you'd like me to continue in any way, shape or form, let me know. What else would you like to see or learn about when it comes to health and longevity? Just let me know in the comment section below. Bye for now.
Can you make your pecs dance?
Pecs dance? No, they've got about as much rhythm as the rest of me.